to fly on some of those future missions. How does that make you feel?
Honestly, it's a little unbelievable to me. I could barely imagine what it'd be like to go to the space station until I did it. And just thinking about what it would be like to look back at the Earth from orbit around the moon or even standing on the moon kind of blows my mind.
Wow.
So yeah, it's hard to even imagine that that's true, but it's a really special time to be at NASA and an even more special time to be in the astronaut office.
Yeah, that's a beautiful picture of you seeing the moon, right?
Yeah, that's sort of a moon spotting adventure there. I've got binoculars. One thing that's really cool about seeing stars and the moon from orbit is you're not looking at them through the atmosphere. So you get these very clear views.
Oh.
And the moon is always super spherical. You never get these sort of slices that look kind of flat from Earth. Up there, you see it in 3D, it feels like.
Wow.
So yeah, I think we all sort of fall in love with the moon from space in a whole new way.
Yeah. Well, today's launch attempt comes amid a very busy year for us at NASA. Some of the highlights include 2 more commercial crew launches with SpaceX, Crew 4 in April, you're seeing there, and Crew 5 last month. In May, NASA and Boeing flew OFT-2, the second uncrewed flight test of the Starliner capsule. The goal is to certify the capsule for regular flights to the International Space Station after a crewed flight test next year. In July, we released the first images captured by our James Webb Space Telescope, and wow, they are magnificent. Pictures like these could help us answer some of astronomy's biggest questions about how our universe began. And then in September, we intentionally slammed the DART spacecraft into asteroid Dimorphos and successfully changed its course. The asteroid wasn't headed for Earth, that's important to say, but the test was to show that we could defend our planet if needed. And recently, 2 other missions that benefit the Artemis program. Last week, we tested a new inflatable heat shield that could help us eventually land humans on Mars. And just 2 days ago, Capstone arrived at its intended orbit around the moon. The small satellite launched from New Zealand in June and will now test the unique lunar orbit for a future space station there. You heard us talk about a gateway. Now, Kayla, what do you think about all that NASA is accomplishing?
I mean, those are all just amazing examples of why it's such a cool time to be part of human spaceflight and the larger space program. We're learning so much, not only about our home planet, but our galaxy and the universe. Like those James Webb images just capture my imagination every time they release a new set.
Yes.
And so we have a lot going on and a lot to be excited about right now.
I hope people are following along for it because it is truly great, and we want people to share along with that. So, all right, 1 hour, 6 minutes and counting from liftoff of Artemis 1. Let's head back to the Launch Control Center with Daryl Nail.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. And so we get an update for you now. The Red Crew, of course, completed its work on torquing down the bolts for that replenish valve on the core stage hydrogen side. And now we are back in replenish for core stage hydrogen, which is good news. The team now looking to work on that upper stage, and we understand for the update to the NASA test director, they just informed the NTD that they can start getting back the flow on the upper stage as well. It went into a stop flow roughly around 10 p.m. Eastern time after a leak was detected. You can see the core stage status there. Liquid oxygen side is in stable replenish, both for the core stage and the upper stage of the rocket. Over on the right side, you can see we've lost some hydrogen since going into a stop flow. That allowed some liquid hydrogen to boil off during about an hour or so while a Red Crew was sent out to the launch pad to make repairs. Now, the hydrogen bleed for the engines was reestablished, and it looks like the team is back on track to recover that after a stop flow halted the bleed. They are required to bleed that liquid hydrogen through the RS-25 engines for 90 minutes, but they're picking up where they left off, and that appears to be on track. In the meantime, we've had an update from the range, and the range has informed the NASA test director that currently at the moment, if we were to launch now, they are no-go due to the loss of signal on a radar site. That's currently being worked right now. Again, the range advising the NASA test director that they are no-go. The range is not clear for launch until they remedy that issue on their radar site. And so we're also tracking that. In the meantime, we started this at 3:23 p.m. Eastern Time. Got the core stage tanked in about 4 hours and 23 minutes, and now looking to get everything back on track to try to make that launch window at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time, which has a 2-hour window associated with it, all the way to 3 a.m. Eastern Time. That's the latest from the firing room. Megan, back to you.
Thank you, Daryl. Now, there may not be astronauts aboard the Orion spacecraft for this flight test, but there are some passengers there with very important missions.
Inside the Orion spacecraft, as we fly around the moon, we have some cool experiments going on to help us understand what the environment is like.
Although there's no humans aboard Artemis 1, we do have a few special passengers aboard that will help us pave the way for future Artemis missions.
So there's basically 3 occupants riding. You can kind of think about it like 3 astronauts. We have a moonikin. We will also have 2 torsos that are learning about the moon and learning about the environment for our astronauts before they go.
We have a mannequin on Artemis 1. We call him our moonikin for short.
That moonikin is called Commander Moonikin Campos.
The name is actually in homage to Arturo Campos,
who was an important person who helped bring the Apollo 13 capsule home. The moonikin will sit in the commander's seat, and it will wear a suit just like our astronauts will wear.
Moonikin Campos is actually weighted to simulate an actual human aboard the Orion spacecraft.
So it will help us understand what our astronauts will experience as they go to the moon and home.
The Orion Crew Survival System suit and the Orion seat were designed simultaneously to fit together as a seamless package. The actual design of the suit was built into the Orion seat such that when they're in the suit, in the seat, it is a true cocoon of protection for them. During this test flight, the seat will actually be instrumented with accelerometers.
Sensors that tell us how much the chair is shaking during launch and re-entry and how many G-forces or gravitational forces it experiences.
We expect Commander Moonikin Campos to have a very exciting ride on his way to orbit. The thrill of launch, the experience of weightlessness, the excitement of landing. What we learn on Artemis 1 with our mannequins assistants will help us better understand how a human will actually behave in the seat, both for landing and for launch to allow us to ensure their safety.
In addition to the moonikin, we'll have 2 seats that have basically what's like a human dummy, an upper torso that are detecting how much radiation they're experiencing.
It's called the Matryoshka Astrorad Radiation Experiment, MARE. MARE is an international collaboration with German Aerospace Center, DLR, and with Israel Space Agency. The MARE experiment consists of 2 anthropomorphic phantoms called Helga and Zohar that are simulating a female body in a space radiation environment.
One of those will be wearing a safety vest,
the Astrorad radiation vest,
that we hope will help protect our astronauts from radiation.
Each one of the 2 phantoms will be equipped with about 20 battery-operated radiation instruments.
So between the 2, we'll be able to determine how well we can protect our astronauts from radiation events.
Space radiation is a mix of high-energy, heavy-charged particles that originate from the sun. To put things in perspective, 1 year of Earth exposure to cosmic rays is equivalent with 1 day of space radiation exposure in deep space. The purpose of the MARE experiment is to learn more about the radiation exposure as well as the biological effects of different organs.
So basically, it's like we have 3 occupants inside Orion that are learning about the moon and learning about the environment for our astronauts before they go.
Going back to the moon with new exploration goals and new technologies will help us gain better understanding of the challenges we encounter with deep space exploration.
We will have to develop new technology and solutions to meet really difficult challenges. But that's what NASA does. That's what Artemis is all about.
And we have one more passenger to tell you about. It's everyone's favorite beagle that's had a special connection with NASA ever since Apollo.
Artemis is NASA's plan to go back to the moon, and Snoopy is to be the zero gravity indicator.
A zero-G or zero gravity indicator demonstrates the moment that the crew in the spacecraft reach weightlessness.
Snoopy is about to take his first trip around the moon.
The relationship with NASA and Snoopy goes back about 50 years since the Apollo days.
He was the face of the safety campaign.
The icon for NASA's culture of safety and mission success. So NASA and Peanuts have a Space Act agreement.
And we collaborate together on STEM content. And we really were excited when it was decided that Snoopy would be the zero gravity indicator on Artemis 1. We wanted to go all out, so we created a custom Snoopy.
And the spacesuit is actually made out of material worn by the NASA astronauts.
Everything was done with extreme detail. They cut patterns for his suit, even how his collar worked and how the NASA Meatball logo looked.
We're very excited. I'm personally very excited.
I can't contain the excitement I am feeling about this day. Snoopy is going farther in space than he's ever been before.
This is a day that we've all been waiting for. It's fantastic.
And we snapped this picture of Snoopy and Orion. He's comfortable and ready for his journey to the moon. Lucky for us that Snoopy has this twin that's staying here on Earth. That way we can take a closer look at how cute he is. And this orange suit, I mean, it is amazing. It's actually the same material that would be worn by Artemis astronauts, right?
Yeah, you know, the suits we'll be wearing in Artemis ultimately are an update of the suits that the shuttle crews wore. They're this iconic orange color, and we've updated them though with new technologies and also new crew capabilities so that they can best protect the crew in our return to the moon. I actually got to work with that suit team before my assignment,
that's cool.
And so the suit's kind of near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I think we have a picture of you wearing the suit as part of when you were helping to design it, right?
Yeah, so I was our representation from the crew office, from the astronaut office, to the engineering team that's working on putting this suit together. So I got the chance to wear it for some of the early testing, and it is an amazing suit, and it'll protect us while we're in the vehicle.
Cool. So what was your zero-G indicator?
Yeah, like the video mentioned, we always choose stuffed animals. So we actually had a turtle. We named her Fowl, which is German for peacock. And we chose that because Raj and I are from the turtle training class. So we thought it would be fun to have a sea turtle as our zero-G indicator. But we wanted to have a nod to Matthias, who is a German astronaut, so that's why we gave her a German name, and Tom, who's from the peacock class. So she's peacock colored, and it kind of worked for everybody.
I was about to ask, I was like, wait, why is it German for peacock, but it's a turtle?
Yeah, exactly.
Now I get it.
It was a, diplomacy, crew diplomacy move.
Now I get it. So we had Turtle, we have Snoopy here. Why is it always toys?
I think the tradition goes back to crews taking stuffed animals from their children and sometimes flying the stuffed animals of their kids. That still happens to this day when a crew selects a zero-G indicator, but they're convenient because they're nice and soft. So if you're going to allow something to bounce around in the capsule, you want to make sure that it won't hurt the crew or any of the equipment.
And they're cute. I mean, come on.
Who doesn't want a mascot?
Makes you smile, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, NASA's workforce has changed over the last 50 years. For Artemis 1 today, women make up 30% of the launch team. But when we first stepped on the moon with Apollo 11 in 1969, take a look at this picture here. You see this woman highlighted near the center there? That's going to be Joanne Morgan, and she was the only woman in the firing room. She now has a special message for the Artemis generation.
Hello, I'm Joanne Morgan, and I am so excited for Artemis 1. This flight test will bring new knowledge to people on Earth, and I'm thrilled to see such a diverse team at the LCC making it happen. Firing Room 1 is a different sight today than when I was on console for Apollo 11. I was totally focused on doing my job and never thought about being the only woman in the room. Today, women at NASA are center directors and launch and flight directors and have substantial roles in engineering, science, and technical areas. This is so important for a new generation, the Artemis generation, to see how individuals are leaders and contributors to the mission, and for youth across America and the planet to see this as well. After 50 years, it is gratifying to see this change, and I can't wait to see what you all accomplish together New century, new generation, new mission to the moon and beyond. Godspeed, Artemis team and Artemis 1.
I think it's so great that we know she's following along and interested in this mission too.
Yeah, it's so awesome to see the women who have come before us at NASA and paved the way for a much more diverse team to contribute to these amazing missions.
Yeah, and speaking of women breaking the mold, before serving as a NASA astronaut, I know you were a naval officer and a member of the first class of women commissioned to the submarine community. How amazing is that? I mean, what would you say as you look at these pictures? What would you say to women, young girls who might be thinking, hey, I might want to join a predominantly male field?
Yeah, you know, I was just really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. I was a senior at the Naval Academy when they announced that they were going to change the policy and allow us to serve aboard submarines. But even before that change happened, I knew that I was passionate about serving in that role and I was dreaming about it. So I think allowing yourself to really examine what your passions are and be brave enough to dream that you could actually do those things. I had awesome mentors who encouraged me along the way and told me never close a door on yourself. You know, you always want to put yourself in the roles you're most passionate about, especially if you're going to challenge yourself. Doing something you love that's hard is so much better than doing something that you're not as well suited to. So I was just lucky I had some awesome leaders in my life who encouraged me to be brave enough to dream so that when those opportunities presented themselves, I was ready to take them on.
Yeah, no, that's great. Having mentors is always so important because, yes, sometimes you don't know what path to take, especially if you're blazing your own. So it's always so nice to have somebody to talk through some of that.
Absolutely.
52 minutes until the opening of the 2-hour window for Artemis 1 today. Once it soars off the launch pad, our colleagues over in Houston will take over. Leah, how are things looking in mission control right now?
Hey Megan, I'm here now, and thanks for joining us again here in the White Flight Control Room here at NASA's Johnson Space Center. So you might be wondering why Johnson Space Center will control the flight of Orion after liftoff, even though it's launching at Kennedy Space Center, and that's all about how our flight control centers are designed. Launch control is at Kennedy, while mission control is in Houston, and we also have the SLS Engineering Support Center at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Ever since the Gemini 4 mission in 1965, all flights have been commanded from Houston after launch, so we have the infrastructure and the experience here at Johnson Space Center to work through long-duration missions with, or in this case, without crew. Additionally, launches must be conducted over water rather than over populated areas, which makes Kennedy Space Center a prime location. Again, we're ready to jump into action once SLS takes flight, and this room will be staffed around the clock until Orion splashes down at the end of the mission. We're excited to continue that work today with Artemis 1 and throughout the Artemis program, but for now, we'll turn it back over to you, Megan and Kayla.
Now, the fully stacked SLS and Orion system was rolled from the vehicle assembly building to the launch pad about 2 weeks ago. We captured this video of the 4-mile, 9-hour journey. It took a special transporter and a special team of people to make it happen. Hear from them what it's like to shoulder the weight of this moment.
The crawler transporter is a machine that goes and picks up the mobile launcher, the SLS rocket with Orion. It's basically the cornerstone of the mobile launch concept. Without the crawler, you couldn't transport the mobile launcher and the vehicle from the VAB to the pad or the pad back to the VAB. And it was designed and built for the Apollo program to move Saturn V's to the launch pad. Since then, we've modified it and used it to move the entire shuttle program. And after the shuttle program, we did extensive modifications, and now it's to be used to move Artemis to the launch pad. The crawler is 136 feet long from end to end. It's 114 feet wide from the edge of the truck to the other edge of the truck. It weighs 6.6 million pounds. It has the power to do 2 miles an hour, but you never want to go that fast. Generally, we're around 0.83 for SLS. Artemis will be one of the heaviest loads we've ever carried and one of the tallest loads we've carried. I am exceptionally proud of our team. They're very talented, they're very committed, and they're just all around good team. I think any problem that crops up or anything that comes up, we'll fix it and we'll get moving again. And again, it starts right here with the crawler. So if we do our job and everybody else does theirs, man, we're going to have a successful launch. We're going back to the moon. This is going to be just fantastic.
Such an impressive team, and the crawler, Kayla. I mean, this is a certificate from the Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah, it's pretty cool getting recognized for the heaviest self-powered vehicle in the world at 3,106 tons.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
I know. We were just talking about how awesome the crawler is. I mean, it was retrofitted. It was created in the Apollo for the Apollo missions, and it was updated, modified for shuttle, and now it's been modified for Artemis. It's just really an amazing machine, and the people who keep it maintained and operate it. Like, I'm so glad that we could feature them today.
Absolutely.
All right, so we are 48 minutes and counting, again, from that opening of the 2-hour window we have today. Kayla, if you thought you were excited, you have got to check out this video here.
This is really cool. We got some children that are on a bus, and they're going to come here to the vehicle assembly building, and the administrator and I are going to jump on the bus and surprise them.
We're going to give them the opportunity to come in and go up the elevator with the rocket.
Wow! It's so cool! Look at that thing! That's awesome!
Hey guys, would you like to see a moon rocket?
Yeah!
Because it is the future of our country, indeed the future of the world. And we saw what our space program does for science and technology and engineering and mathematics. We saw that in the Apollo generation.
All right, guys, what do you think? What I hope to achieve today is inspiring a new generation. I mean, the more people that we can get to see up close and personal this rocket, it's awe-inspiring. And I cannot wait till the launch. When America sees our rocket actually launch on a test flight to the moon, you know, it's just going to spark a whole new push for what we are doing.
Best day of my whole life ever. It's going to be incredible. It was a dream come true.
This rocket is definitely going to the moon.
I think it's really amazing.
And I was actually really excited because I've never seen a rocket like this close up.
Now we have the Artemis generation. This is a new generation of us going back to the moon to learn and live, and then we're going to Mars.
I told you they were so excited. They're so cute, their faces, it was amazing.
I think my face looked pretty similar the first time I walked into the VAB and looked up at that rocket. I mean, the building is huge, and standing at the base of the rocket just takes your breath away. The scale of it, you know, 322 feet, especially stacked on its end like that, is just amazing. So yeah. I almost relived my first time in the VAB through their eyes.
And it was really cool. There was this opportunity where they got to just ask any questions they wanted. I was there, so they were asking me questions. They were asking the administrator, Bob Cabana as well, and they just hands shot up. They just had questions, and then sometimes I didn't really know the answer, and they're like, well, it's this, and I was like, oh my God, they know so much and they're so interested in it. I mean, again, this is why we're doing this. This is part of the inspiring the next generation.
Absolutely. Whenever I get a chance to interact with kids kind of any age, all the way from elementary school up through college, the human spaceflight program, and Artemis in particular, I think really captures people's imagination and gets them interested in everything it takes to do something so daring and so complicated.
Yeah. And actually, before we move on, an interesting note about the opening music in that video. It's an original composition called The Artemis Generation, performed by the Cooper Middle School Band percussion section of McLean, Virginia. And to continue to inspire the Artemis generation, NASA invited students to take part in a national essay contest, challenging them to imagine what it'd be like to lead a week-long mission to the moon's South Pole. Here's the first winner now.
I gazed out of our moon pod window just before it was time to exit. My crew of 3 and I had been working for years to get here. Our crew consisted of a botanist, an engineer, a doctor, and me, an astrobiologist. We'd been picked because of how well we got along together, with our complementary STEM backgrounds and our naturally upbeat personalities. Houston, this is Artemis Crew 1, initiating airlock sequence, I said over my microphone. I looked at my crewmates, and as I stepped out of the pod, I felt so gratified, becoming the first woman on the moon. Our purpose was to set up a moon habitat containing the 4 things needed to keep a crew safe: oxygen and clean water, a waste disposal system, the veggie project for food, and a protective outside shell made of regolith and mycelium. We will build it over the next week, and it will be used by other astronauts for years to come. Embarking on this incredible adventure, I couldn't help but be grateful to be given this opportunity to lead the most remarkable crew, and to know that I was a part of the Artemis generation.
So that was beautifully written by Taya Sauer of Laguna, California, and she was one of 3 essay winners. The 2 others were Austin Pritz of Walcott, Indiana, and Amanda Gutierrez of Lincoln, Nebraska. If you want to check out their essays, you can scan the QR code you see on the screen. The 3 of them beat out nearly 14,000 students who submitted essays, so you definitely want to check out the other 2, again, by scanning this QR code. So right now you're looking live at right outside of Kennedy Space Center's visitor complex. We have plenty of bleachers set out to accommodate, as you can see, a lot of guests that are hoping to see the launch today. So why don't we go in there and check back in with NASA's Leah Martin.
Hi, Megan. Yeah, this place is filling up. You can feel the excitement, people chattering, people sharing stories, people talking. And, you know, we just heard about those Artemis Moonpod essay winners who are part of the Artemis generation. Also joining me tonight from the Artemis generation, we have 2 students who were actually able to come down and visit at Kennedy Space Center to watch this launch live tonight. I'm joined here by Denham and Allison. How does it feel to be here tonight?
Really, when I first found out, I was really nervous. I didn't really know what to expect. Like, we really just looked at each other and we kind of screamed.
Yeah. Just out of excitement?
Yeah.
How did you feel?
Honestly, it was like amazing. It was surreal. Like that we have this opportunity out of so many people who applied for this. It was like outstanding.
And you guys actually got to take a tour of Kennedy Space Center a little bit earlier this week. What was something that you got to see that was just really outstanding?
I think it was the shuttle experience, like how it is when the rocket ship goes on up with people in it. It was honestly really fun doing it and learning like how they feel at the moment.
And Denham, what do you think it will be like to watch the world's most powerful rocket launch tonight from just across the river?
Well, really, I don't really know what to expect because I've never really done this before, but I feel like it would really be outstanding. I might shed a little tear, but I don't really know. Like, I'm really excited to be here, and it's amazing. Like,
it is amazing, and I don't think you're going to be the only one shedding tears tonight. Megan, we're super excited, eyes on Artemis, and we're ready to see the launch.
Thanks so much, guys. Now, Kayla, are you ready for more questions from social media? We're getting them in.
Always.
All right, let's take a look at the screen now. We have another celebrity question.
Hey, I'm Keke Palmer, and I play Izzy Hawthorne in Pixar's Lightyear, and I can't wait to see Artemis 1 launch today. How will going back to the moon pave the way to Mars?
Thank you, Keke.
Yeah, what an awesome question for tonight. I mean, the return to the moon is going to give us a chance to test all of the capabilities we need to operate on Mars. Mars is really far from home. It's going to take us 6 months just to get there, and that's with ideal planetary alignment and expected advances in propulsion technology. Then we'll spend about a year plus on the surface before it's 6 months home. And so the moon is a lot closer. We can get there in 3 days. The communications delay is a lot shorter, and so we can really test our operational concepts a lot closer to home. The moon's super far away. It's 250,000 miles, but that's way closer than Mars. So it's going to give us a chance to test all of our technologies so that we know what we need to develop in order to take that next step.
Yeah, we call it the next giant step for a reason. Mars is very, very far, like you said. All right, let's take another question from social media. Kayla, what inspired you to be an astronaut?
You know, my journey was a little bit different than some of my colleagues. I didn't grow up specifically dreaming of becoming an astronaut. I don't know what the barrier was there. I was aware of and inspired by the space program, but I never allowed myself to dream of becoming an astronaut until I had served on a submarine, actually. I think that operational experience that's so similar to what we do in the space program, if you think about it, we're sending humans to live, work, and do something of importance in a place where people aren't supposed to be, the depths of the ocean or the vacuum of space. And so I think those experiences gave me the confidence to even dream that I could become an astronaut, and then inspired me to apply in the first place.
And that doesn't deter you, again, like being in a place where, yeah, we're not supposed to be, a confined space at that.
Yeah, I think those parallels, I got a chance to meet an astronaut after serving on my submarine, Kay Heyer, who's also a Naval Academy graduate, class of 1981. And hearing about her experiences working on the space station really made me click. All of a sudden I said, the space station's a submarine in space.
Yes.
And it sounds silly, but I had never made that connection before. And once I did, I just couldn't stop dreaming about it.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that your story isn't, you know, the typical one, as you said. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Is Snoopy ready and excited?
Of course. I think like any crew member, Snoopy's been training for this moment. He knows what to expect in a nominal and an off-nominal launch and all the actions expected of him. So like any good crew member, he's ready to go.
And he has a suit that's been tailored to him. It's especially made for him, the way that the astronaut suits are especially made for them. So yeah, I think he's ready.
Yeah, seeing the moon up close, he's ready to go.
So keep those questions coming. Use that hashtag Artemis and tweet or drop them in the comments wherever you're watching this broadcast. And don't forget those NASA Moon Snaps. Hashtag NASA Moon Snap for your moon-inspired content. Okay, we are now 37 minutes from the opening of our 2-hour launch window today. Let's check back in with Daryl with the launch team.
Yeah, we've had a couple of issues that the launch team has been working, and we have an update on both of those. First of all, is the leak, the liquid hydrogen leak in the replenish valve out at the mobile launcher. We understand from the launch team that that leak has not recurred. The work that happened out at the pad is that the Red Crew and the work that they did out there remedied the leak. That's good news. And now the liquid hydrogen tank on the core stage is back in replenish at this moment. And the upper stage of the rocket, liquid hydrogen side, is in fast fill. You can see from the graphic there that we are back up to 100% over on the liquid hydrogen side on the right hand of the screen. On the left hand of the screen, you can see we have been in stable replenish for liquid oxygen. Now, with regards to the range, they reported that they had an issue to the NASA test director with their radar sight. Later found out that that was actually a bad Ethernet switch that was cutting out and not providing them the data. The range reported that they will swap out that bad switch, and they're currently working on that. They advised at the time, about a half hour ago, that it would take them about 70 minutes, or about 25 minutes into that work. They did just recently update the NASA test director to say that it's going to take them a little bit longer because they're going to need to re-verify this Ethernet equipment once they have it installed. Again, that work is ongoing, but at the moment, if we were launching right now, the range is no-go as a result of that bad Ethernet switch. The Dolly Loop file, which helps steer the Space Launch System through the upper atmosphere, has been uploaded to the rocket, and so we're good to go there in terms of other configurations that are ongoing. But we are continuing to monitor communications of the launch team about holding to the top of the window, currently slated for 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time. But we do have 2 hours, and we have yet to see whether or not the launch team is going to be able to make enough adjustments in order to hit the top of that window. No slip yet, but we're monitoring their work, and we'll give you an update when we have it. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Daryl. Really great news about that leak. Kayla and I actually said, wow, that's really great news. So we'll wait on your next update. Let's go back live now to Kennedy Space Center's visitor complex, where we have NASA's Dan Hewitt inside there with our new moon board. Dan, let's focus in on Orion now. It has 3 main elements, right?
That's right, Megan. And Orion is the spacecraft that's going to be carrying our Artemis astronauts off of planet Earth and then returning them home. As you said, 3 major components, so we'll jump in here at the top with the first one, the launch abort system. This is a critical safety feature on Orion, designed to pull the capsule away from the SLS stack in the event of an emergency on the pad or the way uphill. And it does that using 3 solid rocket motors. The first one, the abort motor, can fire within milliseconds of automatically detecting an issue, pulling the capsule away to a safe distance. After that, the attitude adjustment motor. This one will fire. We can cancel out any rates, put us into a nice stable glide before we get ready to fire the jettison motor. This is the one that will actually take the launch abort system off of Orion, allowing it to then deploy parachutes and parachute down to safety. I will note the jettison motor, the only one that fires no matter what on a normal mission. It's going to fire once we're high enough in the atmosphere. And for Artemis 1, that is the only motor on this that is active. The attitude and abort motors are inert for Artemis 1. And that's all focused on protecting this, the Orion crew module. This is where you have your astronauts physically inside. In the capsule, you have everything you need to keep a crew safe, happy, healthy, thriving in deep space. You have a pressurized environment, seats, crew displays, toilet, everything that you need. On the outside, couple of critical features. On the bottom, the heat shield. Remember, this is goal number 1 for this mission, is testing that heat shield. It's an ablative structure made to survive that fiery re-entry at the end of a mission. Along the outside, you see these small gray circles. Those are reaction control system thrusters. Orion can use that at the very end to control the yaw, pitch, and roll as it's hurtling through the atmosphere. We have windows. You need windows to look outside. 2 in the front, 2 on the sides, 1 in the side hatch, 1 up top in the very top docking hatch. Those are different layers of glass and acrylics for pressure and thermal control. We have a docking system, an uprighting system, parachutes, all for the very end of the mission. Third and final piece, down here at the bottom, the European Service Module. This has all of the propulsion assets for after SLS has done its job. Starting on the bottom, the large orbital maneuvering system engine. This is the one that's providing the most thrust for all of those key maneuvers around the moon. 8 auxiliary thrusters also around the aft to the bottom part of the service module to provide some additional push as well. And then 24 of these smaller reaction control system thrusters. They can be used for attitude control, which way you're pointing, as well as small translational maneuvers moving side to side. We flip the vehicle up, we see 4 solar arrays, each one 24 feet in length, altogether generating 11 kilowatts of electrical power for Orion systems. Inside the service module, you have tanks for things like the thermal control system, potable water when we have a crew on board, and also pressurized oxygen and nitrogen for an atmosphere, which gets fed through this umbilical here to the crew module, along with electrical lines. That's also what's going to separate us at the very end of the mission. So that's Orion. It's going to be making its first flight around the moon on Artemis 1. Can't wait to see it, taking those selfies around our lunar neighbor. Send it back over to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. That last component Dan talked about, the European Service Module provided by the European Space Agency. Let's go to Jasmine for that.
Thank you, Megan. We are back in Firing Room 2 with the Launch Control Center, and joining us now is Philippe Delou, ESA's Program Manager for the Orion European Service Module. You have quite the title there, a big title for a big job, I'm sure. We are very glad to have you here, and we understand that the European Service Module is powering Orion that's going to send humanity farther than ever before. Philippe, how is it getting us there?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So yes, the service module accommodates the propulsion system that contains, among the tanks and the pressurization of the system, the engine, all the engines, 33 engines in total, among which the main engine, which is going to perform the burns to put Orion into the moon orbit and then back on the trajectory to return to Earth. The other engines are used for attitude correction during, attitude control and trajectory correction during the travel to the moon. In addition to the propulsion system, the service module generates the power and distributes the electricity to the crew module and the service module equipment so that they can operate. And the third function is the thermal control of the system. The service module accommodates radiators to reject the heat that is produced by all the equipment and the crew that will eventually be in the Orion. Finally, not on Artemis 1, but on future Artemis mission, it will have tanks to store the crew consumable, the water, the oxygen, and the nitrogen.
Right. So we understand, too, that you are monitoring launch here in Firing Room 2 with us. And you also have a team. We're going to bring up a picture of that team right now, or a live look inside ESA's control room in the Netherlands. So can you tell us, what is your team working on today?
Yes. Well, the ESA team is not only back in the Netherlands, it's one aspect, but we have also a significant team in the control room in Johnson, in the MER control room. And their role is to monitor the telemetry from the service module to make sure that all parameters are within their nominal behavior, that the operations are performed also nominally, and for sure identify if something goes wrong, if something goes not nominal. And if something non-nominal is identified, then they will have the role to support the NASA team to troubleshoot the anomaly and prepare the recommendation to be brought to the mission management team for a decision on how to operate the vehicle forward.
Great. We're really glad to hear that your teams are monitoring here, Johnson in the Netherlands as well. And this has been a huge collaboration. There were 10 countries that contributed to the European service module. Can you tell me about that teamwork?
Indeed, it was a real teamwork of about 60 companies across 10 European countries. Together with the prime contractor, we have selected the finest companies available in Europe to build a state-of-the-art equipment which is needed to go back to the moon with humans.
Right, we're going back to the moon and farther even beyond. Thank you so much, Philippe. I really appreciate you being here tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Of course, of course. Megan, back to you.
Now it's time to check back in with Mission Control in Houston. Leah, how are things over there?
Things are good over here at Johnson Space Center, which is just one part of an agency-wide effort with many NASA programs doing their part to make future missions a reality. When the first woman and first person of color travel to the moon, they'll be wearing a state-of-the-art launch and entry spacesuit called the Orion Crew Survival System. When they set foot on the moon, they'll be in another all-new next-gen suit, both being developed at the Johnson Space Center and through partnerships with commercial providers. During those spacewalks, astronauts will collect samples for further study of the moon. The Astromaterials Research and Exploration Science Division at JSC is preparing to receive rocks, soil, and ice collected from the moon's south pole, which has a unique crater impact history and ice deposits that have never been sampled. And leading the effort to advance capabilities for science, exploration, and commercial development of the moon is the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Initiative, or CLPS. More than a dozen American companies are developing science investigations and tech demos. Additionally, we need a sustainable presence, a specific station in orbit to facilitate continuous lunar access and serve as a home base or a jumping off point for new deep space exploration missions. This is where Gateway comes in. It's a multi-purpose lunar space station being developed by a worldwide effort led out of JSC. NASA is again teaming up with international and commercial partners to create this essential component. Artemis and Gateway will enable NASA's Human Research Program to better understand how the human body adapts beyond low Earth orbit, ensuring future astronauts traveling to the moon and Mars have the tools to keep healthy and thrive in new environments. And with that, we're going to turn it back over to Megan and Kayla at Kennedy.
Thank you so much. So Artemis will also facilitate new discoveries about the moon. So to tell us what we're hoping to learn, we have Sarah Noble here. She's the Artemis Lunar Science Lead. Great to have you here.
Thanks.
So tell us about what we know about the moon.
Yeah, so we learned a ton about the moon during Apollo, right, from the samples and the data that we collected. In fact, we're still learning from those samples and data even today, 50 years later. But then since Apollo, you know, we've actually been studying the moon mostly from above, learning about getting more of a global perspective on the moon that we really didn't have during Apollo. And so that's allowed us to ask a lot better questions and to understand where to go to find the answers to them.
Now that we're headed back to the moon, sending human beings as part of the Artemis program, what are we hoping to learn that's new?
Yeah, so we're going to an entirely different part of the moon for Artemis, right? During Apollo, we kind of landed almost in the same place, like 6 times, right? In the sort of central near side of the moon. But for Artemis, we're going to go explore a new part of the moon. We're going to go to the South Pole, which is some of the oldest rocks on the moon. It's the part of the original crust of the moon. And there's places there that are permanently shadowed, where we think that water and other molecules sort of get trapped, and we really want to understand what those are, and so that we can use them for both science and for as a resource.
Sarah, we're also planning to land a rover at the South Pole of the Moon in late 2024. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The Viper rover, the Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration Rover, is going to go land near the South Pole, and it's actually going to explore some of these permanently shadowed areas. It's going to dip into them, drill down, try to find out what that water is, what else is there, what form that water is, how much is there, so that we can really understand it both from a science perspective, and if we want to use it as a resource, we will understand how to extract it.
So some people might say, you know, we have all these rovers, we have access to machines that can do a lot of the work on the surface of the moon for us, so why is it important to return humans to the moon?
Yeah, it's not an either-or proposition, right? There are some things that robots are better at and some things that humans are better at. And it turns out that humans are much better field geologists. We're really much more efficient and better at that. Plus, we can do better. We can deploy more complicated instruments, and we can use tools in ways that it's very difficult for robots to do, so we can collect better samples. And one of the great things is that we can bring back a lot of samples, right? When we do robotic sample return, it's usually a very small amount. But if you look at what we brought back from Apollo, it's a large amount of samples that literally hundreds, probably maybe thousands of scientists have been able to study over the years and over generations. And that's a lot of brain power to put behind those samples.
So again, that's how Artemis and Apollo are different. Now we're utilizing machines and people.
That's right.
To hopefully advance. Yeah.
That's right.
Perfect. Sarah, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
So in honor of our destination, the moon, we asked you all to create moon-inspired content and share them with us using the hashtag #NasaMoonSnap. We got so many wonderful submissions, so why don't we check them out now? That was a really cool look at all the different kinds of creations, recipes, and also art, and it was great to see what people submitted.
Yeah, it's awesome to see the creativity out there and how people are engaging with this mission in so many different ways.
Yeah. So I know that you didn't submit it yet, but you did create a moon snap, so to say. So why don't we take a look at that picture?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite pictures of the moon that I was able to take from orbit. I think for me, it kind of reminds me of that iconic picture of moonrise or Earthrise from the moon from Apollo. And it's kind of that in reverse. I think there's something about seeing the moon from orbit around the Earth that makes it seem a little bit easier to imagine what it'd be like to have that view from the moon looking back at our home planet.
Yeah, you should definitely submit that because that's an amazing photo. Did you take that yourself?
Yeah, out of the cupola window aboard the space station.
Wow, the resolution's great.
The cameras we have up there are incredible.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So I haven't taken a moon snap, so I had nothing to submit. So how do you feel about creating a moon snap with me?
Let's do it.
All right, well, take that, if you don't mind lifting it up, and we're just gonna snap a photo here. Oh, lighting. Perfect. So I just created a moon snap. I love it. I'm going to share it. And again, this is just to encourage people to really get involved in this mission. So we will continue to collect and share those photos. So again, if you have a NASA moon snap, just use that hashtag. Okay, Artemis 1 comes amid a very busy year, an exciting year at NASA. Some of the highlights include 2 more commercial crew launches with SpaceX, Crew 4 in April, and then Crew 5 last month. In May, NASA and Boeing flew OFT-2, the second uncrewed flight test of the Starliner capsule. The goal is to certify the capsule for regular flights to the International Space Station after a crewed flight test next year. In July, we released the first images captured by our James Webb Telescope, and oh my, those are really beautiful, fascinating photos, and they're going to really help us answer some of astronomy's biggest questions about how our universe began. And then in September, we intentionally slammed the DART spacecraft into asteroid Dimorphos. Boom, look at that. And we successfully changed its course. The asteroid wasn't headed for Earth, but the test was to show we could defend our planet if needed. And recently, 2 other missions that benefit the Artemis program. Last week, we tested a new inflatable heat shield that could help us eventually land humans on Mars. And just 2 days ago, Capstone arrived at its intended orbit around the moon. The small satellite launched from New Zealand in June and will now test a unique lunar orbit for a future space station there.
Artemis 1 heralds a new era in the history of human spaceflight. It marks a pivotal next step in humanity's return to the moon, ushering in a new generation of astronauts, technology, and research. This critical flight test sets the course for a bright future at the moon. It represents our ability to safely send Artemis astronauts and critical hardware to lunar orbit. Humanity will experience Artemis in different ways than we did Apollo. We will explore new areas of the moon with 21st century materials, technologies, systems, and operations. Gateway will be humanity's first space station to orbit the moon, built with next-generation technology. Gateway will not only provide a deep space outpost for future lunar expeditions, it will also serve as a station for landers, experiments, and supplies. Starting with the core power and habitation elements, Gateway will grow with increasing capability as international partners contribute new habitat and refueling modules, observation windows, external robotics, and more. Gateway will enable longer stays and more science to be conducted on and around the moon than ever before. And one day, it will help set the stage for missions to Mars. A highly skilled, diverse core of astronauts will be selected for Artemis missions, including the first woman and first person of color to step foot on the moon. Aboard Gateway, the crew will conduct exciting research from their unique deep space vantage point. Gateway will also be a transfer station for astronauts to board innovative human landing systems that will ferry them to and from the lunar surface for exciting scientific expeditions near the South Pole. Once on the moon, Artemis astronauts will use expertise in fields like biology and geology to conduct groundbreaking research in modern spacesuits using advanced tools. They will drive new rovers to investigate the lunar terrain and unlock some of the greatest mysteries of our solar system. Artemis 1 cements our capability to send astronauts and cargo to the moon for years to come. We're going back to the moon. We are Artemis.
As we approach the opening of our 2-hour launch window, we have a special musical performance for you. America the Beautiful, played in honor of the flight test by the Philadelphia Orchestra and Yo-Yo Ma. truly beautiful performance. It really has me feeling quite emotional right now.
Yeah, perfect tribute for tonight's launch.
You know, it's just, it gives me a sense of pride, really, to just remember that our country continues to lead our nation in space exploration. And as such, the White House is closely watching this historic launch. Earlier this year, Vice President Kamala Harris came down to Kennedy Space Center and met with NASA leadership as well as astronauts. She also toured our facilities where teams are working on hardware for future Artemis missions. Before leaving, she signed a piece of the Orion spacecraft that will fly on Artemis 3. She's doing it right there, which will return astronauts to the lunar surface. Okay, Kayla, time for more social questions. So let's take the first one. You know now the drill. It's going to be a celebrity question, so let's take that.
Hey guys, I'm Jack Black, and I'm super excited for the Artemis 1 launch today. I was part of a little movie called Apollo 10.5, A Space-Age Childhood, and I have a few burning queries. Question the first. How is Artemis different than Apollo?
Artemis is different than Apollo because we're returning to the moon, but this time we're going to stay. So rather than a short visit where we can do some amazing science, but it was pretty limited by these short visits, kind of a small area of the moon, we're going to the South Pole and we're going to learn how to live there long term. So we're going to be building habitats, we're going to have rovers, we're going to have all of this infrastructure on the moon supporting scientific discovery, but also that next big step to Mars.
I love seeing celebrities also take part and ask questions because it really shows that this is something that's captivating a lot of people. So that was really fun to see Jack Black. Also, query the first. That was funny. All right, let's go to the second question. How does it feel in space?
Being in space is amazing. I mean, for us launching to orbit around the Earth and then go to the space station where I just was for 6 months, we're in an apparent microgravity environment. So for us, it feels like we're weightless, like we're floating. So you have to relearn how to live and work in that space. But once you get used to it, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we were just talking, Jessica Watkins, another NASA astronaut, was just here. And she was saying that actually when you came back on Earth, that was an adjustment as well because you got so used to living on the space station.
Yeah, the transition home was actually a lot harder for me than the transition up there because our vestibular systems kind of remap. We start ignoring all the sensors in our inner ear that tell us how our bodies are moving because the space environment is so strange, but we really need that on Earth to balance and control our bodies.
Sure.
So when we get back, it takes a couple of days before we feel comfortable again.
Really interesting. Thanks so much for those. Okay, so we are 10 minutes until the opening of our 2-hour launch window today. So why don't we head back over to Daryl. Daryl, tell us what's happening now.
Yeah, Megan, we actually have about 10 minutes before we go into a half-hour hold. That half-hour hold is part of the L clock, and what you see on your monitor right now, I believe, is the T clock. So in about 10 minutes, we'll hold for a half hour, and currently the launch team is trying to evaluate how much of a delay may result from some issues that we've been facing over the past hour. Just to recap those, we had a leak in a replenish valve on the mobile launcher that feeds into the liquid hydrogen core stage tank. That's been resolved. The leak has been fixed, and we're moving forward. Currently, the upper stage of the rocket for liquid hydrogen is roughly 78% at the moment. So that is tracking. Progress continues there. The core stage has been topped off, and now both liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen are 100%, along with the upper stage of the liquid hydrogen side of the equation. So we're just waiting on the complete tanking of the upper stage liquid hydrogen. Now, with regards to the range issue that we had, we just got an update from the range, the 45th Space Wing officer reporting in to the NASA test director that the Ethernet switch has been replaced. This problematic switch took down their ability to see radar from one of their assets, which is key in getting acquisition and signal for the flight termination system if it were to be needed. Of course, this is a critical system that has to be tested before we can launch. So at the moment, we're looking still at a 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time launch. But it is pretty clear from the work that is ahead that it looks like we're going to slip into that window. How much exactly, we don't have an accurate calculation from the launch team as of right now. But of course, we're anticipating that. So for the moment, you see on your clock now, we are in the T-minus 10-minute hold. We just entered that. And now, roughly, we're looking at 28 minutes to resume terminal count. The launch team will assess what work needs to be done, how that syncs up with the range getting back online with their equipment, and then we should have a new T0 for you soon. That's the latest from Firing Room 1 here at the Kennedy Space Center. Megan, back to you.
So things are obviously still very dynamic. We're going to come back to Daryl as much as possible. Now, to understand where we are going, we have to know where we have been. To do that, we spoke to some of the special few who walked on the moon and those who sent them.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
It's been 50 years since we've been to the moon, and we've got a great program called Artemis. We're going back. The Apollo program was a test for the American people that you can do what you set out to do. All it took was turning to it and making it happen.
We are go for a mission to the moon at this time.
Engines on 5, 4, 3, 2, all engines running. Launch commit, liftoff. We have liftoff, 49 minutes past the hour.
I think the characteristics that I remember most of the Saturn V was the noise. The noise was enormous and it was almost impossible to communicate.
We're go, swing tight, we're go.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
The landing to me was a great celebration. The nation was almost euphoric.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
There are so many things that we could eventually learn about our universe and the spacecraft that we use exploring.
We are a nation of explorers. During Apollo, we were on national TV literally every day because we were doing something visible that Americans could see and they could feel and say, look what we are doing. And I believe Artemis is going to come up and say, look what we are capable of and what we are doing now.
Artemis will stand on the shoulders of Apollo. They're going to have the eyes of the world on them when they start down this trail.
The science of a space flight is one that will continue to inspire. Going to the moon generates technology, more communications, more computer technology, more sophistication in manufacturing that help us in everyday life.
We have a generation that is ready, a generation with that technology, a generation with the education. Artemis represents the future in space. It is our next big step, and it is time to take it.
If you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we are showing you a live look of another visitor center. This is the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. Wow, take a look at all of those people who are there hoping to watch the launch today. You know, this is the visitor center for the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. That center played a crucial role in contributing to the Artemis program, so I'm not surprised that there are a bunch of people there watching. All right, so now we're going to take go back to Leah Martin over at Banana Creek. Again, that's right outside of our visitor center, and she's with some other folks who came out to watch today's launch.
Yeah, you know, Megan, we talked about this being America's rocket, right? Every state in the United States has contributed to this rocket, so it should be no surprise that we have people from all over the country joining us here tonight. I'm actually joined by some friends of ours who are joining us from Georgia and Utah. What does it mean to be here tonight to see tonight's launch?
I think it's amazing. I know that tons of people from all over the United States have helped build the rockets and are here tonight, so it's awesome to know that we all have a little bit of personal ties to the rocket.
And go ahead.
No, I'm just excited to be here because I've been a fan of space travel and going to the moon and back, and I'm glad to see it's happening again later in life.
And you were actually telling me a little bit earlier that you grew up in the Apollo era in those years following those first launches, and now here, how does it feel to be watching the sister program launch and seeing at the beginning?
Look at the goosebumps. That tells it all right here. I'm totally thrilled to be here.
Now, and you were actually telling me that you have a personal connection to this rocket as well. You know some people who have worked on it. What do you think it feels like being here? How does it feel for you to see something that's the culmination of so many years of hard work?
Yeah, I think it's crazy when you think about how long it takes to build it and stuff. Like, I wasn't even born last time people tried to get to the moon. So it's awesome. I think it's so exciting, and I cannot wait.
And we have a ton of people who are working tonight still on console. We just want to tell them words of encouragement. What more do you have to say?
Oh, I hope it goes tonight.
Megan, back to you.
Go Artemis.
Woo!
Go Artemis. Yes, I love that. And again, I just love these drone shots that we're showing of all the people who are here ready, hoping, anticipating launch today. So now let's head back over to Dan. So Dan is in the Apollo Saturn V Center, which is right next to this crowd that you're seeing here. He's inside there, and he's going to tell us more about SLS using an interactive state-of-the-art tool we're calling the Moonboard.
That's right, Megan, and everybody, welcome back to the Moonboard. So just to recap, SLS out on the pad, on the mobile launcher. Daryl's been walking you through all of the tanking, all of the preparation. We had that hydrogen leak that was in the base of the mobile service structure here. That's been remedied. We haven't had any issue with those tail umbilicals that we were tracking so closely back in August and September. So everything looking really good with SLS. Just to recap, most powerful rocket we have ever built. It's propelled by 2 solid rocket boosters and 4 engines on this core stage. Now these solid rocket boosters are going to be firing for the first roughly 2 minutes of the flight, a little more than 2 minutes. And we call them solids because of the type of propellant in there. If you forgot it already, it's aluminum powder, ammonium perchlorate, and polybutadiene acrylonitrile. It's a binding agent that's inside. Solid propellants are extremely stable. They're very reliable. But once you ignite them, they're going to keep burning. You can't really throttle them up and down like you can with liquid-fueled engines. You can throttle just based off of the distribution. So you basically put more propellant in some areas and less in others as you're trying to really throttle the rocket down, which we do as we go through things like max Q, maximum dynamic pressure. And just a reminder, as these things are firing, they can steer, they can gimbal. The bottom part here, gimbal just means you can really direct, and they're providing 90% of the steering as SLS is making the flight uphill, and more than 75% of the thrust with those 2 firing at the same time. And again, they're attached to this. This is the core stage, 212 feet tall, the largest single stage we've ever constructed. It's been through the green run test, a lot of preparation for this flight today, and it is propelled by these 4 RS-25 engines. Now these are liquid fueled rocket engines, so you have a fuel and an oxidizer, and one of the great things about liquid fuel is you can throttle them in real time. You could kind of like the gas in your car, you can go faster or a little bit slower. So these throttle up to 104% of their rated thrust at the time of liftoff. We throttle them down as we go through max Q, so the maximum amount of pressure on SLS on the way uphill, and then throttle them back up until they've consumed all of their propellants. And they're consuming that propellant at more than 1,500 gallons a second. That is just an astronomical amount of fuel that's running through these engines to produce that thrust. Each of these up to 500,000 pounds each during their operation. And of all the different components, we've got this engine block section down here. You have all of the associated plumbing, everything to feed those propellants down to these engines. You also have these 2 attachment points here, and that's where we actually tank the SLS rocket. So a lot of focus on those in the previous attempts. They've cooperated spectacularly so far today, and we've been able to fully tank this core stage. And a reminder, you have a fuel, about 500,000 gallons right here of liquid hydrogen, and then an oxidizer. You need those two together, and then an ignition source. That's what gives you your reaction, your thrust, your basically controlled explosion that then comes out of those rocket engines. So fully tanked, these are cryogenic fuels, hundreds of degrees below zero, so we've got a spray-on insulation across the entire vehicle. As it's sitting out there in the Florida air, it's a little bit warm tonight, but we need to keep those hundreds of degrees below zero. It takes a lot of energy to do that, so the less you have to use to keep them cold, the better, which is why we have that insulation. So we're going to be seeing SLS take flight for the first time tonight as we clear all of those final issues. Again, this is going to be one heck of a show when this thing launches into the night sky. So with that, send it back over to you, Megan.
If you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center for live launch coverage of Artemis 1. I'm NASA's Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Barron. It's been great having you these past 2 hours.
It's been so awesome to be here for this historic launch tonight.
So right now we are awaiting a new T0. The launch team had to work through some issues, and they're doing a great job at working through those issues. So now we're just waiting to see a new T0, since we had been aiming for the top of the launch window, which opened does open at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time. Now today is a big deal. Apollo 17 in 1972 was the last time humans stepped foot on the moon. That the rocket you see right there behind us, illuminated in the darkness there, is the first step back towards getting us to the moon. Now Artemis 1 is the first integrated flight test of NASA's deep space exploration systems. That's the ground systems here at Kennedy Space Center, the Space Launch System, or SLS rocket, and the Orion spacecraft. We will send an uncrewed Orion spacecraft farther beyond the moon than any of the Apollo missions before it. For Artemis 2, Orion will have astronauts on board as it orbits the moon. Then future Artemis missions will land the
달의
first
첫
woman and
발자국을
first
남긴
person
뒤에
of color
인류는 수십
on the
년간
surface
달에
of the moon.
탐사해 왔는데요.
So Kayla, why do we
이제
want to go
달의
back to
우주
the moon?
탐사를 위한
The moon's a
전진 기지를
super
만드는
interesting
작업을
place to study. It can
시작합니다.
tell us a
그
lot
첫
about the
작업으로
Earth,
우리 시간 내일
its own
밤 9시
formation, but
반쯤
also
역사상
more about
가장
our solar
강력한
system.
로켓이
And we
마네킹을
also want
태우고
to
달로
return this time
출발합니다.
in an
김민 기자입니다.
international partnership for a permanent presence
우주
on the
발사
lunar
시스템이
surface.
발사대에
It'll
우뚝
teach us
서
everything we need
있습니다.
to know to travel on
거대한
Mars.
로켓 1단 위에
And what
우주선
about for
오리온을
you? I mean,
올렸는데
you
높이는
have, the
98m,
possibility of
무게는 무려
being selected for
2,500ton에
these
달합니다.
future missions because
주 엔진은
they,
우주
the
왕복선에
Artemis
썼던
program
엔진
can
4기를
choose
묶었고
from
양쪽
any of
옆엔
the
고체
astronauts.
부스터도 달았습니다.
It's a crazy
이륙할 때
time to be
내는
a NASA
힘만
astronaut.
4,000톤,
I wouldn't imagine that that could be
누리호
real.
1단
I
엔진
think we're all
13개를
just honored
합친
to be a part
것보다
of the team
강력합니다.
that's doing this. We're just a
27톤 이상의
small
많은 짐을 실어
representation
달까지
of all
보낼
the
수 있습니다.
amazing human beings around the
다만
world.
돈이
It takes
문제입니다.
to do something as
한 번
audacious
발사에
as
5조
returning
5천억 원이
to
듭니다.
what we need to go on
이번
Mars.
발사는
So
3단계
we're so
아르테미스
excited to
계획 중
support the
첫 번째
program in
임무입니다.
any way we can. But
무인
of course,
우주선을 달 궤도로
the ride to the moon
보냈다가
would be
지구로
incredible.
돌아오는
So I think we're
210만
all
킬로미터의
just dreaming
여정입니다.
about those moonwalks.
사람이
Now,
안
since
타지만
Artemis 1 is
조종석엔
setting
각종
the stage
센서를
for
단
those future
3개의
crewed missions,
마네킹이
is there
탑니다.
anything in particular
그
about
당시에는
this
우주
26-day
방사선이
mission that you will be
사람한테
watching? Is
어떤
it
그
random?
건강상의 문제를 일으킬지
Yeah,
모르니까
we
가능한
mentioned
빨리
that a
간
few times
거고요.
throughout the
이번엔
broadcast
6주
tonight.
정도
The
예상하고
re-entry
있어요.
is a
굉장히
really
오래
important part
걸리잖아요.
of the flight, of
마네킹에다가
course. And the heat
방사선
shield, we're
센서를
interested
달아서
in seeing how it performs.
진짜 사람을 보내는 건 3년 뒤인 2025년. 비행사는 백인 남성이 아닌 여성과 유색인으로 결정했습니다. 한편 우주선 오리온은 우리 달궤도선 다누리를 만나지는 못합니다. 가는 궤적도 다른 데다 42일 만인 오는 10월 10일 지구로 돌아올 예정이기 때문입니다. 이제 우주 발사 시스템은 초읽기에 들어갔습니다. 날씨 등 큰 문제가 없다면 우리 시간 내일 밤 9시 반쯤 달나라로 향합니다. JTBC 김민희입니다.
앞으로 1시간 반쯤 뒤 미국에서 50년 만에 달에 사람을 보내기 위한 긴 여정이 시작됩니다. 3년 뒤에 사람을 태우고 떠나기 전에 오늘은 마네킹을 태운 달 탐사선이 먼저 답사를 가는 겁니다. 그리스 신화 속 달의 여신 이름을 딴 아르테미스 프로젝트인데요. 인류가 우주에 또 한 걸음 내딛는 순간을 김민 기자가 미리 보여드립니다.
미국의 달 탐사선 오리온을 실은 로켓이 발사 카운트다운에 들어갔습니다. 탐사선 안에는 마네킹들이 타고 있습니다. 1972년 태양신을 뜻하는 아폴로 프로젝트가 막을 내린 지 50년 만에 사람을 달에 보내는 계획이 다시 시작된 겁니다. 아폴로의 쌍둥이, 달의 여신의 이름을 딴 아르테미스 프로젝트입니다. 첫 과제는 탐사선 오리온을 달로 쏘는 겁니다.
We've done the battery charging on both Orion and the core stage. Those are complete.
So that's all going really well and all as planned and on schedule.
오리온은 달 궤도를 탐사하고 42일 뒤엔 지구로 돌아옵니다. 3년 뒤인 2025년 여성과 유색인으로 이뤄진 2명의 우주인을 달 지표면에 보내기 위한 사전 답사 성격입니다. 계획대로 된다면 백인 남성이 아닌 사람이 달에 가는 첫 역사가 됩니다. 이를 위해 탐사선 오리온에 탄 마네킹엔 방사선 측정 장치를 달았습니다. 우주 방사선이 인체에 미치는 영향을 파악하기 위해서입니다. 오리온을 싣고 가는 건 아폴로보다 작지만 세상에서 가장 강한 4,000톤의 힘을 내는 로켓입니다. 아르테미스 프로젝트는 우주가 탐험의 대상을 넘어 개발의 대상이 됐다는 의미가 큽니다. 달엔 헬륨3와 히토류 등 희귀 자원이 있다고 알려져 있습니다. 또 산소나 물은 달에서 생활하는 데 사용할 수 있고 화성으로 갈 연료도 만들 수 있습니다.
실질적으로 참여하는 건 대부분 다 민간 기업들이 해요. 일부 나사의 기술적 지원을 받아서 이제 대부분 다 하죠. 이제 정치적인 활동이 아니고 경제적인 활동, 그래서 자원 탐사도 이제 겸할 수 있는 것이 핵심이죠.
우리나라의 첫 달 탐사선 다누리도 아르테미스 프로젝트에 참여했습니다. 반세기 전에 미국이 소련과 패권 경쟁을 벌였다면 이젠 미국의 경쟁 상대는 중국입니다. 중국은 2년 전 달의 흙을 지구로 가져왔습니다. 또 달에 화물을 50톤 보낼 수 있는 로켓도 갖고 있습니다. 중국은 2030년이 되기 전에 달에 사람을 내릴 계획입니다. JTBC 김민입니다.
밤사이에 일어난 일입니다. 미국 항공우주국 나사가 현지 시간 어제 오전 11시 17분 아르테미스 1호 발사를 중단했습니다. 하마터면 큰일 날 뻔했습니다. 이 모든 준비가 끝나고 연료죠. 이 액체 수소를 로켓에 넣고 있었는데 이게 탱크에 들어가는 연료만요 378만 리터나 되거든요. 이거를 넣던 중에 경보가 울려서 잠시 멈췄고 다시 주입을 시작했는데 이때 연료가 새기 시작한 겁니다. 결국 나사는 발사를 2시간 28분 53초 남기고 비행을 취소했습니다. 그런데 비슷한 일이 지난주에도 있었습니다. 그때도 거의 같은 결함이었습니다. 이번 발사 취소 직후에 이 나사 고위 관계자들이 기자회견을 열었는데 내용 한번 들어보겠습니다.
On Monday, it was a manageable leak. This was not a manageable leak.
Just remember, we're not going to launch until it's right. And that is standard operating procedure.
I am NASA's spacewalk
and will continue to be.
I'm the program scientist for space biology.
네, 제가 전문가는 아니지만은 쉬운 문제 같지는 않습니다. 전문가들은 다음 발사가 빠르면 10월 혹은 연말쯤으로 보고 있습니다. 5조 원 넘게 들인 이번 프로젝트는요, 의미가 남다릅니다. 1972년이었죠. 미국은 아폴로 17호를 달로 보냈고 이후에 50년 만에 다시 유인 달 탐사를 하려는 겁니다. 그때에 비하면 우주과학은요, 지금 비교할 수 없을 정도로 발전했습니다. 그럼에도 인간의 달 탐사는 이렇게나 참 어려운 일입니다. 50년 전 인류가 얼마나 대단한 일을 한 건지 새삼 끼치게 되는 뉴스입니다.
1969년 달에 첫 발자국을 남긴 뒤 인류는 수십 년간 달을 탐사해 왔는데요. 이제 달의 우주 탐사를 위한 전진 기지를 만드는 작업을 시작합니다. 그 첫 작업으로 우리 시간 내일 밤 9시 반쯤 역사상 가장 강력한 로켓이 마네킹을 태우고 달로 출발합니다. 김민 기자입니다.
우주 발사 시스템이 발사대에 우뚝 서 있습니다. 거대한 로켓 1단 위에 우주선 오리온을 올렸는데 높이는 98m, 무게는 무려 2,500톤에 달합니다. 주 엔진은 우주 왕복선에 썼던 엔진 4기를 묶었고 양쪽 옆엔 고체 부스터도 달았습니다. 이륙할 때 내는 힘만 4,000톤, 누리호 1단 엔진 13개를 합친 것보다 강력합니다. 27톤 이상의 많은 짐을 실어 달까지 보낼 수 있습니다. 다만 돈이 문제입니다. 한 번 발사에 5조 5천억 원이 듭니다. 이번 발사는 3단계 아르테미스 계획 중 첫 번째 임무입니다. 무인 우주선을 달 궤도로 보냈다가 지구로 돌아오는 210만 킬로미터의 여정입니다. 사람이 안 타지만 조종석엔 각종 센서를 단 3개의 마네킹이 탑니다.
그 당시에는 우주방사선이 사람한테 어떤 그 건강상의 문제를 일으킬지 모르니까 가능한 한 빨리 간 거고요. 이번엔 6주 정도 예상하고 있어요. 굉장히 오래 걸리잖아요. 마네킹에다가 방사선 센서를 달아서.
진짜 사람을 보내는 건 3년 뒤인 2025년. 비행사는 백인 남성이 아닌 여성과 유색인으로 결정했습니다. 한편 우주선 오리온은 우리 달궤도선 다누리를 만나지는 못합니다. 가는 궤적도 다른 데다 42일 만인 오는 10월 10일 지구로 돌아올 예정이기 때문입니다. 이제 우주 발사 시스템은 초읽기에 들어갔습니다. 날씨 등 큰 문제가 없다면 우리 시간 내일 밤 9시 반쯤 달나라로 향합니다. JTBC 김민희입니다.
앞으로 1시간 반쯤 뒤 미국에서 50년 만에 달에 사람을 보내기 위한 긴 여정이 시작됩니다. 3년 뒤에 사람을 태우고 떠나기 전에 오늘은 마네킹을 태운 달 탐사선이 먼저 답사를 가는 겁니다. 그리스 신화 속 달의 여신 이름을 딴 아르테미스 프로젝트인데요. 인류가 우주에 또 한 걸음 내딛는 순간을 김민 기자가 미리 보여드립니다.
미국의 달 탐사선 오리온을 실은 로켓이 발사 카운트다운에 들어갔습니다. 탐사선 안에는 마네킹들이 타고 있습니다. 1972년 태양신을 뜻하는 아폴로 프로젝트가 막을 내린 지 50년 만에 사람을 달에 보내는 계획이 다시 시작된 겁니다. 아폴로의 쌍둥이, 달의 여신의 이름을 딴 아르테미스 프로젝트입니다. 첫 과제는 탐사선 오리온을 달로 쏘는 겁니다.
We've done the battery charging on both Orion and the core stage. Those are complete. So that's all going really well and all as planned and on schedule.
오리온은 달 궤도를 탐사하고 42일 뒤엔 지구로 돌아옵니다. 3년 뒤인 2025년 여성과 유색인으로 이뤄진 2명의 우주인을 달 지표면에 보내기 위한 사전 답사 성격입니다. 계획대로 된다면 백인 남성이 아닌 사람이 달에 가는 첫 역사가 됩니다. 이를 위해 탐사선 오리온에 탄 마네킹엔 방사선 측정 장치를 달았습니다. 우주 방사선이 인체에 미치는 영향을 파악하기 위해서입니다. 오리온을 싣고 가는 건 아폴로보다 작지만 세상에서 가장 강한 4,000톤의 힘을 내는 로켓입니다. 아르테미스 프로젝트는 우주가 탐험의 대상을 넘어 개발의 대상이 됐다는 의미가 큽니다. 달엔 헬륨3와 히토류 등 희귀자원이 있다고 알려져 있습니다. 또 산소나 물은 달에서 생활하는 데 사용할 수 있고 화성으로 갈 연료도 만들 수 있습니다.
실질적으로 참여하는 건 대부분 다 민간 기업들이 해요. 일부 나사의 기술적 지원을 받아서 이제 대부분 다 하죠. 이제 정치적인 활동이 아니고 경제적인 활동, 자원 탐사도 이제 겸할 수 있는 것이 핵심이죠.
우리나라의 첫 달 탐사선 다누리도 아르테미스 프로젝트에 참여했습니다. 반세기 전에 미국이 소련과 패권 경쟁을 벌였다면 이젠 미국의 경쟁 상대는 중국입니다. 중국은 2년 전 달의 흙을 지구로 가져왔습니다. 또 달에 화물을 50톤 보낼 수 있는 로켓도 갖고 있습니다. 중국은 2030년이 되기 전에 달에 사람을 내릴 계획입니다. JTBC 김민희입니다.
밤사이에 일어난 일입니다. 미국 항공우주국 나사가 현지 시간 어제 오전 11시 17분 아르테미스 1호 발사를 중단했습니다. 하마터면 큰일 날 뻔했습니다. 이 모든 준비가 끝나고 연료죠. 이 액체 수소를 로켓에 넣고 있었는데 이게 탱크에 들어가는 연료만요. 378만 리터나 되거든요. 이거를 넣던 중에 경보가 울려서 잠시 멈췄고 다시 주입을 시작했는데 이때 연료가 새기 시작한 겁니다. 결국 나사는 발사를 2시간 28분 53초 남기고 비행을 취소했습니다. 그런데 비슷한 일이 지난주에도 있었습니다. 그때도 거의 같은 결함이었습니다. 이번 발사 취소 직후에 이 나사 고위 관계자들이 기자회견을 열었는데 내용 한번 들어보겠습니다.
On Monday, it was a manageable leak. This was not a manageable leak.
Just remember, we're not going to launch until it's right. And that is standard operating procedure.
Thank you both for that interview.
We'll continue
now, teams over at NASA's Johnson Space Center also
네, 제가 전문가는 아니지만은 쉬운 문제 같지는 않습니다. 전문가들은 다음 발사가 빠르면 10월 혹은 연말쯤으로 보고 있습니다. 5조 원 넘게 들인 이번 프로젝트는요, 의미가 남다릅니다. 1972년이었죠. 미국은 아폴로 17호를 달로 보냈고 이후에 50년 만에 다시 유인 달 탐사를 하려는 겁니다. 그때에 비하면 우주과학은요, 지금 비교할 수 없을 정도로 발전했습니다. 그럼에도 인간의 달 탐사는 이렇게나 참 어려운 일입니다. 50년 전 인류가 얼마나 대단한 일을 한 건지 세상 끼치게 되는 뉴스입니다.
1969년 달에 첫 발자국을 남긴 뒤 인류는 수십 년간 달을 탐사해 왔는데요. 이제 달의 우주 탐사를 위한 전진 기지를 만드는 작업을 시작합니다. 그 첫 작업으로 우리 시간 내일 밤 9시 반쯤 역사상 가장 강력한 로켓이 마네킹을 태우고 달로 출발합니다. 김민 기자입니다.
우주 발사 시스템이 발사대에 우뚝 서 있습니다. 거대한 로켓 1단 위에 우주선 오리온을 올렸는데 높이는 98m, 무게는 무려 2,500ton에 달합니다. 주 엔진은 우주 왕복선에 썼던 엔진 4기를 묶었고 양쪽 옆엔 고체 부스터도 달았습니다. 이륙할 때 내는 힘만 4,000톤, 누리호 1단 엔진 13개를 합친 것보다 강력합니다. 27톤 이상의 많은 짐을 실어 달까지 보낼 수 있습니다. 다만 돈이 문제입니다. 한 번 발사에 5조 5천억 원이 듭니다. 이번 발사는 3단계 아르테미스 계획 중 첫 번째 임무입니다. 무인 우주선을 달 궤도로 보냈다가 지구로 돌아오는 210만 킬로미터의 여정입니다. 사람이 안 타지만 조종석엔 각종 센서를 단 3개의 마네킹이 탑니다.
그 당시에는 우주방사선이 사람한테 어떤 그 건강상의 문제를 일으킬지 모르니까 가능한 한 빨리 간 거고요. 이번엔 6주 정도 예상하고 있어요. 굉장히 오래 걸리잖아요. 마네킹에다가 방사선 센서를 달아서
진짜 사람을 보내는 건 3년 뒤인 2025년. 비행사는 백인 남성이 아닌 여성과 유색인으로 결정했습니다. 한편 우주선 오리온은 우리 달궤도선 다누리를 만나지는 못합니다. 가는 궤적도 다른 데다 42일 만인 오는 10월 10일 지구로 돌아올 예정이기 때문입니다. 이제 우주 발사 시스템은 초읽기에 들어갔습니다. 날씨 등 큰 문제가 없다면 우리 시간 내일 밤 9시 반쯤 달나라로 향합니다. JTBC 김민희입니다.
앞으로 1시간 반쯤 뒤 미국에서 50년 만에 달에 사람을 보내기 위한 긴 여정이 시작됩니다. 3년 뒤에 사람을 태우고 떠나기 전에 오늘은 마네킹을 태운 달 탐사선이 먼저 답사를 가는 겁니다. 그리스 신화 속 달의 여신 이름을 딴 아르테미스 프로젝트인데요. 인류가 우주에 또 한 걸음 내딛는 순간을 김민 기자가 미리 보여드립니다.
미국의 달 탐사선 오리온을 실은 로켓이 발사 카운트다운에 들어갔습니다. 탐사선 안에는 마네킹들이 타고 있습니다. 1972년 태양신을 뜻하는 아폴로 프로젝트가 막을 내린 지 50년 만에 사람을 달에 보내는 계획이 다시 시작된 겁니다. 아폴로의 쌍둥이, 달의 여신의 이름을 딴 아르테미스 프로젝트입니다. 첫 과제는 탐사선 오리온을 달로 쏘는 겁니다.
We've done the battery charging on both Orion and the core stage. Those are complete. So that's all going really well and all as planned and on schedule.
오리온은 달 궤도를 탐사하고 42일 뒤엔 지구로 돌아옵니다. 3년 뒤인 2025년 여성과 유색인으로 이뤄진 2명의 우주인을 달 지표면에 보내기 위한 사전 답사 성격입니다. 계획대로 된다면 백인 남성이 아닌 사람이 달에 가는 첫 역사가 됩니다. 이를 위해 탐사선 오리온에 탄 마네킹엔 방사선 측정 장치를 달았습니다. 우주 방사선이 인체에 미치는 영향을 파악하기 위해서입니다. 오리온을 싣고 가는 건 아폴로보다 작지만 세상에서 가장 강한 4,000톤의 힘을 내는 로켓입니다. 아르테미스 프로젝트는 우주가 탐험의 대상을 넘어 개발의 대상이 됐다는 의미가 큽니다. 달엔 헬륨3와 히토류 등 희귀 자원이 있다고 알려져 있습니다. 또 산소나 물은 달에서 생활하는 데 사용할 수 있고 화성으로 갈 연료도 만들 수 있습니다.
실질적으로 참여하는 건 대부분 다 민간 기업들이 해요. 일부 나사의 기술적 지원을 받아서 이제 대부분 다 하죠. 이제 정치적인 활동이 아니고 경제적인 활동, 그래서 자원 탐사도 이제 겸할 수 있는 것이 핵심이죠.
우리나라의 첫 달 탐사선 다누리도 아르테미스 프로젝트에 참여했습니다. 반세기 전에 미국이 소련과 패권 경쟁을 벌였다면 이젠 미국의 경쟁 상대는 중국입니다. 중국은 2년 전 달의 흙을 지구로 가져왔습니다. 또 달에 화물을 50톤 보낼 수 있는 로켓도 갖고 있습니다. 중국은 2030년이 되기 전에 달에 사람을 내릴 계획입니다. JTBC 김민희입니다.
밤사이에 일어난 일입니다. 미국 항공우주국 나사가 현지 시간 어제 오전 11시 17분 아르테미스 1호 발사를 중단했습니다. 하마터면 큰일 날 뻔했습니다. 이 모든 준비가 끝나고 연료죠. 이 액체 수소를 로켓에 넣고 있었는데 이게 탱크에 들어가는 연료만요. 378만 리터나 되거든요. 이거를 넣던 중에 경보가 울려서 잠시 멈췄고 다시 주입을 시작했는데 이때 연료가 새기 시작한 겁니다. 결국 나사는 발사를 2시간 28분 53초 남기고 비행을 취소했습니다. 그런데 비슷한 일이 지난주에도 있었습니다. 그때도 거의 같은 결함이었습니다. 이번 발사 취소 직후에 이 나사 고위 관계자들이 기자회견을 열었는데 내용 한번 들어보겠습니다.
On Monday, it was a manageable leak. This was not a manageable leak.
Just remember, we're not going to launch until it's right. And that is standard operating procedure. And will continue to be.
네, 제가 전문가는 아니지만은 쉬운 문제 같지는 않습니다. 전문가들은 다음 발사가 빠르면 10월 혹은 연말쯤으로 보고 있습니다. 5조 원 넘게 들인 이번 프로젝트는요, 의미가 남다릅니다. 1972년이었죠. 미국은 아폴로 17호를 달로 보냈고 이후에 50년 만에 다시 유인 달 탐사를 하려는 겁니다. 그때에 비하면 우주과학은요, 지금 비교할 수 없을 정도로 발전했습니다. 그럼에도 인간의 달 탐사는 이렇게나 참 어려운 일입니다. 50년 전 인류가 얼마나 대단한 일을 한 건지 새삼 끼치게 되는 뉴스입니다.
1969년 달에 첫 발자국을 남긴 뒤 인류는 수십 년간 달을 탐사해 왔는데요. 이제 달의 우주 탐사를 위한 전진 기지를 만드는 작업을 시작합니다. 그 첫 작업으로 우리 시간 내일 밤 9시 반쯤 역사상 가장 강력한 로켓이 마네킹을 태우고 달로 출발합니다. 김민 기자입니다.
우주 발사 시스템이 발사대에 우뚝 서 있습니다. 거대한 로켓 1단 위에 우주선 오리온을 올렸는데 높이는 98m, 무게는 무려 2,500ton에 달합니다. 주 엔진은 우주왕복선에 썼던 엔진 4기를 묶었고 양쪽 옆엔 고체 부스터도 달았습니다. 이륙할 때 내는 힘만 4,000톤, 누리호 1단 엔진 13개를 합친 것보다 강력합니다. 27톤 이상의 많은 짐을 실어 달까지 보낼 수 있습니다. 다만 돈이 문제입니다. 한 번 발사에 5조 5천억 원이 듭니다. 이번 발사는 3단계 아르테미스 계획 중 첫 번째 임무입니다. 무인 우주선을 달 궤도로 보냈다가 지구로 돌아오는 210만 킬로미터의 여정입니다. 사람이 안 타지만 조종석엔 각종 센서를 단 3개의 마네킹이 탑니다.
그 당시에는 우주방사선이 사람한테 어떤 그 건강상의 문제를 일으킬지 모르니까 가능한 한 빨리 간 거고요. 이번엔 6주 정도 예상하고 있어요. 굉장히 오래 걸리잖아요. 마네킹에다가 방사선 센서를 달아서.
진짜 사람을 보내는 건 3년 뒤인 2025년. 비행사는 백인 남성이 아닌 여성과 유색인으로 결정했습니다. 한편 우주선 오리온은 우리 달궤도선 다누리를 만나지는 못합니다. 가는 궤적도 다른 데다 42일 만인 오는 10월 10일 지구로 돌아올 예정이기 때문입니다. 이제 우주 발사 시스템은 초읽기에 들어갔습니다. 날씨 등 큰 문제가 없다면 우리 시간 내일 밤 9시 반쯤 달나라로 향합니다. JTBC 김민희입니다.
앞으로 1시간 반쯤 뒤 미국에서 50년 만에 달에 사람을 보내기 위한 긴 여정이 시작됩니다. 3년 뒤에 사람을 태우고 떠나기 전에 오늘은 마네킹을 태운 달 탐사선이 먼저 답사를 가는 겁니다. 그리스 신화 속 달의 여신 이름을 딴 아르테미스 프로젝트인데요. 인류가 우주에 또 한 걸음 내딛는 순간을 김민 기자가 미리 보여드립니다.
미국의 달 탐사선 오리온을 실은 로켓이 발사 카운트다운에 들어갔습니다. 탐사선 안에는 마네킹들이 타고 있습니다. 1972년 태양신을 뜻하는 아폴로 프로젝트가 막을 내린 지 50년 만에 사람을 달에 보내는 계획이 다시 시작된 겁니다. 아폴로의 쌍둥이, 달의 여신의 이름을 딴 아르테미스 프로젝트입니다. 첫 과제는 탐사선 오리온을 달로 쏘는 겁니다.
We've done the battery charging on both Orion and the core stage. Those are complete.
Like what can you do and how different does it feel to be in 16G and do these tasks?
We've been training astronauts in geology and geoscience for decades now. The Apollo astronauts had literally hundreds of hours of training in geology before they flew to the moon. It's often said that the Apollo astronauts had the equivalent of a master's degree in geology by the time they flew to the moon. In the intervening decades since Apollo, we've been training astronauts who fly to the International Space Station because when they're on the ISS, they spend time observing the Earth, looking out the window, taking pictures of what they see on the Earth's surface. Now that we're looking at putting astronauts on the surface of the moon, we also take them into the field. We take them to field sites here on Earth that resemble field sites that we expect them to see on the moon.
That's the reason why we take them out into places that are unique, like volcanic landscapes or places that are analogous to the lunar surface, to train them on the scale and fidelity of science that you just can't recreate in these facilities.
And so by combining this classroom and field training, we're able to prep them for fundamentals of geology, the major driving lunar science questions that we have that we hope to address with the Artemis program, and teaching them how to do field work in relevant analog environments.
For just science aspects of developing new spacesuits, can it get you to where you need to go? And then once you get there, can you do the cool science that you need to do? And so that's, can you move effectively and efficiently in the suit to be able to collect the samples or use the tools or the instruments? For the visibility, it's like, can you make the necessary observations that you need to? Or does the suit have the lights on it that it needs to illuminate the surface and make the observations you need to? The lunar South Pole holds tremendous resources that are going to allow us to continue to explore. This is a place that we've never been before. There's so much to be learned from getting boots on the ground and exploring a unique place that challenges us as humans and also helps us develop technologies that make our everyday life that much better.
We think there might be volatiles present at the South Pole. By using these volatiles, we'll be able to do things like create drinking water, create rocket fuel to launch astronauts back to Earth. And so by harnessing the power of the land, we'll be able to help astronauts establish that long-term sustainable presence.
It's human nature to explore. Pushing our boundaries and exploring our universe is, I think, just one of those things that's just stuck in our human nature, and that we need to do it in order to understand the world around us, including our Earth and our solar system.
We just heard there how curiosity is just a part of us. So, with that in mind, why don't we do some social questions? Because some people are very curious to hear what you have to say about their questions. So why don't we pull up the first question here? What are your thoughts on the responsibilities that come with going to space? Obviously a question for you. I am not going to space.
Yeah, the opportunity to travel to space comes with a lot of responsibility. I think for all of us, it's a huge honor to be a part of these teams, and the work we're doing is so critical in supporting scientific discovery on the ground. So on the International Space Station, we're a national laboratory. Our crew executed over 350 different scientific experiments during our 6-month mission. And so when you think about that, it's years of work to get one of these payloads or an experiment on the space station. Yes. And sometimes that's someone's life's work you're holding in your hands and executing. And so being prepared for those moments is really important, and understanding how to bring the team from the ground into solving complex problems. We take that really, really seriously. And of course, we want to share what that experience is like. Only a few people have been able to go to space. And as we commercialize space, as low Earth orbit becomes more accessible, that'll change. But still, still, it's only available to some of us. So we really want to share what that's like and the perspective we gain from our time up there.
It's really great to see and hear that you guys acknowledge that, right? Like that this experiment that you're holding, that you're working on for 6 months, somebody has been working on literally for years. I mean, I've talked to some scientists and they're saying, oh, this has been my life's work, 20 years of my life's work. So yeah, that was a really good question. I like that question a lot. Okay, we have another one from social media here. Astro Kayla, have you considered what you might say if you had the opportunity to be the first female to set foot on the moon's surface?
No, I have not considered that. If I was in that role, it's something I would take really seriously. I think the iconic words of Neil Armstrong, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, are something that we all know, whether you witnessed that moment or not, or it happened before you were born. For me, I think we all have that embedded in our psyche, those important words. So I think it's something I would have to think a lot about ahead of that mission.
Yeah, that would be in the history books. That'll be something you're remembered for. Oh my gosh, I'd be so anxious delivering it, even after I've thought of what I want to say, like to actually open my mouth and say it from the surface of the moon. Wow. Yeah. That we'll have to think about that one for sure. Okay, let's see another question here. Oh, why is the spacesuit orange in color?
That's an awesome question that I wish I knew the answer to. Megan and I were actually talking about that earlier when we had Snoopy up here. It's a continuation of the same suit that we used during the shuttle era. And I was kind of hypothesizing that maybe it's to help forces if for some reason when we landed in the water we had to get out of the capsule for some reason, it would be easy to see us. But that I'm gonna have to take a phone a friend on that one, I think, to know the real answer. I'm sure somebody will be commenting on social media right now with what the real history behind the orange suit is.
I'm trying to think about it too. I'm thinking, does it have anything to do with SLS being orange because of the foam
match
insulation?
Your vehicle.
Yeah,
why not?
Maybe it's that.
I don't know.
I don't know. We got stumped. That was our first one that we got stumped on. Do we have another question? All right. If you could name one of the moon's craters, what would you name it?
Oh man. What would you name it, Megan? I don't know. That's a big decision.
I thought you might say the name of your zero-G graph.
Oh, FOW? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's a pretty big responsibility, I think, to name these geological features. And a lot of the craters on the moon already have names. So I'm sure there's some that maybe they haven't named, they're too small, or we haven't explored them yet. But a lot of them already do have names. Like we're going to be exploring the edge of Shackleton Crater as part of Artemis mission. So a lot of them are already named and mapped.
Yeah. Thanks for throwing it back on me. I was like, I don't know. Do you think our parents or husband or fiance are now upset that we didn't say them?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think so. I think they understand.
All right.
These are big decisions.
This is. All right. Last question here, for this segment at least. What will Orion do when it gets to the moon?
So for this mission, Artemis 1, it's actually going to orbit the moon and then go into a distant retrograde orbit. And so it'll get really close as 62 miles, and then go way past the moon. And way deeper into space than we've ever been before. So yeah, the Orion vehicle will be checking out all of its systems. We're going to be analyzing that data from the ground, and then we're going to see that it can survive re-entry and a successful splashdown off the coast of San Diego.
Yeah, that was a good question too. Okay, well again, just keep those questions coming. We are entering into this launch window, and we do have time, so we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to try at least to answer most of your questions. So you've been hearing throughout the broadcast all the different science that returning to the moon will enable us to do. So there's actually something called the Prime 1 mining experiment, and that's going to robotically look for ice and other resources below the lunar surface.
NASA's first Polar Resources ice mining experiment, also known as Prime 1, will robotically look for ice and other resources below the lunar surface. Thanks to data from spacecraft orbiting the moon, scientists believe that the polar regions contain water ice in the form of ice just below the surface. With the right technologies, that ice is a game-changing resource that can be mined and used to produce propellant and breathable oxygen for future explorers. Under NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services Initiative, the agency selected intuitive machines to fly and land Prime 1 on the moon's south pole. Prime 1 will land near the Shackleton crater to drill into the lunar soil in an area that could contain water ice. Prime 1 is made up of 2 instruments, Trident, the regolith and ice drill for exploring new terrain, and M-SOLO, the mass spectrometer observing lunar operations. Trident will drill up to 3 feet into the lunar surface, extract lunar soil, and bring it up to the surface. Trident drills to its maximum depth in multiple phases, stopping at different increments. As it reaches each desired depth, it will pause and retract the drill string to deposit lunar soil on the surface for analysis. This is where M-SOLO comes in. M-SOLO is a commercial off-the-shelf mass spectrometer modified for spaceflight. It will evaluate the chemical elements and compounds released from the lunar soil for water and other chemical compounds. Trident will then proceed to the next specified depth and repeat the process until samples at all desired depths have been analyzed for water. If no ice is found where Prime 1 lands, NASA will still collect valuable information about drilling into the lunar soil for a future mission. NASA's Viper, the Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration rover, will use Prime 1 technology on a mobile robot that will navigate the Moon's south pole searching for additional resources. Prime 1 data will help NASA assess lunar resources to inform future Artemis missions and a robust human presence on the Moon.
So we are still awaiting a new T0 for today's launch attempt, but for more on what to expect when we launch for this first day, let's go to NASA's Dan Hewitt. He's inside our Apollo Saturn V Center at the KSC Visitor Complex.
Hey, thanks, Megan. Everybody, welcome back to the moon board. There's a lot of people here in the complex. I just heard a woo-hoo. People are getting in and out because we have a great view of launch when it's going to happen, and it's going to happen today. But that launch is just the first step in the Artemis 1 mission. So let's look at what's ahead for this historic first flight. As we just said, launch is step number 1. Those 4 RS-25 engines throttle up, followed shortly after by the 2 solid rocket boosters igniting, sending SLS and Orion skyward. Now on our way uphill, we'll have a number of
1969년
jettison
달에
events.
첫
You'll be able to see
발자국을
things
남긴 뒤
coming off
인류는 수십
of the
년간 달의
SLS
탐사에
rocket.
왔는데요.
One of the most
이제 달의
visual
우주
ones
탐사를
will be
위한
these 2
전진
solid
기지를
rocket
만드는
boosters.
작업을
Now
시작합니다.
they'll expend
그
their
첫
propellant a
작업으로
little over
우리
2
시간
minutes
내일 밤
into the
9시
flight. They will
반쯤 역사상
separate.
가장
We'll see them
강력한 로켓이
flare off
마네킹을
onto
태우고
either
달로
side,
출발합니다.
and then the core
김민
stage
기자입니다.
continues to fire. We're also going to see
우주
the
발사
launch
시스템이
abort system
발사대에
come off the
우뚝 서
top. Once
있습니다.
you get high enough in the
거대한 로켓
atmosphere,
1단
it's
위에
no longer
우주선
required.
오리온을
You can
올렸는데
actually do
높이는
aborts using
98m,
engines on
무게는 무려
Orion and a
2,500톤에
service
달합니다.
module. I will also
주
note
엔진은
that
우주
on the
왕복선에
launch
썼던
abort
엔진
system,
4기를
except those
묶었고
3 solid rocket
양쪽 옆엔
motors,
고체
the jettison
부스터도
motor
달았습니다.
is active.
이륙할
The
때
abort
내는
and the
힘만
active ones
4,000톤,
are not for this
누리호
flight. You
1단
don't have
엔진
diesel,
13개를
so
합친
we're not
것보다
flying a fully
강력합니다.
active abort system.
27톤
We
이상의
also
많은
have
짐을
3
실어
fairings
달까지
that
보낼
are
수 있습니다.
there to protect the
다만
Orion
돈이
service
문제입니다.
module and the crew
한 번
module
발사에
as we're
5조
flying up to the
5천억 원이
really
듭니다.
dense part of
이번
the
발사는
Earth's
3단계
atmosphere.
아르테미스 계획
Next
중 첫
up,
번째
we'll hit
임무입니다.
core stage
무인 우주선을
separation.
달
We've
궤도로
got 4
보냈다가
main
지구로
engines.
돌아오는
We'll hear
210만
MECO, main
킬로미터의
engine
여정입니다.
cutoff. Those engines will
사람이
shut
안
down. The
타지만
core stage will
조종석엔
separate,
각종
drop
센서를
away.
단
It's
3개의
eventually gonna
마네킹이
splash
탑니다.
down in the
그
ocean.
당시에는
Matt
우주
hands over
방사선이
the propulsion
사람한테
duties
어떤
to
그
this, our
건강상의
upper
문제를
stage,
일으킬지
the interim
모르니까 가능한 한
cryogenic
빨리 간
propulsion
거고요.
stage,
이번엔
or
6주 정도 예상하고
ICPS.
있어요. 굉장히 오래 걸리잖아요.
Its first job
마네킹에다가
is to execute what's known
방사선
as a
센서를
perigee
달아서
race maneuver. So the
진짜
perigee
사람을
is the
보내는 건
lowest
3년
part
뒤인
of their orbit.
2025년.
The perigee is the
비행사는
lowest part,
백인
and
남성이
the
아닌
apogee
여성과
is the
유색인으로
highest. We're going to
결정했습니다.
raise up the perigee, and
한편
that's
우주선
going to
오리온은
actually
우리
put a
달
nice
궤도선
circular
단우리를
path
만나지는
around the
못합니다.
planet. And while
가는
we're
궤적도
there, it might give
다른데다
us time to
42일
check
만인
out
오는
Orion.
10월
We're
10일
flying it in
지구로
space
돌아올
for the
예정이기
second
때문입니다.
time, the first time
이제
in
우주
this
발사
fully
시스템은
integrated
초읽기에
stack with
들어갔습니다.
SLS.
날씨
We'll be
등
able to
큰
look at
문제가
all of
없다면
Orion's
우리 시간
system.
내일 밤
Make sure
9시
those
반쯤
solar rays
발나라로
are capturing the
향합니다.
sun's energy and
JTBC
turning it into
김민입니다.
electrical power for Orion systems.
앞으로
Make sure the
1시간 반쯤
communications
뒤
are working.
미국에서
All of our
50년
guidance,
만에
navigation, and
달에
control.
사람을
That
보내기
is your
위한
time to
긴
make sure
여정이
you have a
시작됩니다.
healthy spacecraft
3년
before
뒤에
you do
사람을 태우고
something
떠나기
that is
전에
going to
오늘은
send it to the
마네킹을
moon.
태운
And
달
that's next
탐사선이
up
먼저
on our
답사를
list.
가는
That's
겁니다.
the translunar
그리스 신화 속
injection.
달의 여신
For
이름을
today's
딴
launch profile,
아르테미스
that's going to be a
프로젝트인데요.
firing of about
인류가
18
우주에 또 한 걸음
minutes of
내딛는
that single
순간을
engine on the
김민
upper
기자가 미리
stage. Now
보여드립니다.
that engine
미국의 달 탐사선 오리온을 실은 로켓이 발사 카운트다운에 들어갔습니다. 탐사선 안에는 마네킹들이 타고 있습니다. 1972년 태양신을 뜻하는 아폴로 프로젝트가 막을 내린 지 50년 만에 사람을 달에 보내는 계획이 다시 시작된 겁니다. 아폴로의 쌍둥이, 달의 여신의 이름을 딴 아르테미스 프로젝트입니다. 첫 과제는 탐사선 오리온을 달로 쏘는 겁니다.
We've done the battery charging on both Orion and the core stage. Those are complete. So that's all going really well and all as planned and on schedule.
오리온은 달 궤도를 탐사하고 42일 뒤엔 지구로 돌아옵니다. 3년 뒤인 2025년 여성과 유색인으로 이뤄진 2명의 우주인을 달 지표면에 보내기 위한 사전 답사 성격입니다. 계획대로 된다면 백인 남성이 아닌 사람이 달에 가는 첫 역사가 됩니다. 이를 위해 탐사선 오리온에 탄 마네킹엔 방사선 측정 장치를 달았습니다. 우주 방사선이 인체에 미치는 영향을 파악하기 위해서입니다. 오리온을 싣고 가는 건 아폴로보다 작지만 세상에서 가장 강한 4,000톤의 힘을 내는 로켓입니다. 아르테미스 프로젝트 는 우주가 탐험의 대상을 넘어 개발의 대상이 됐다는 의미가 큽니다. 달엔 헬륨3와 히토류 등 희귀자원이 있다고 알려져 있습니다. 또 산소나 물은 달에서 생활하는 데 사용할 수 있고 화성으로 갈 연료도 만들 수 있습니다.
실질적으로 참여하는 건 대부분 다 민간 기업들이에요. 일부 나사의 기술적 지원을 받아서 이제 대부분 다 하죠. 이제 정치적인 활동이 아니고 경제적인 활동, 자원 탐사도 이제 겸할 수 있는 것이 핵심이죠.
우리나라의 첫 달 탐사선 다누리도 아르테미스 프로젝트에 참여했습니다. 반세기 전에 미국이 소련과 패권 경쟁을 벌였다면 이젠 미국의 경쟁 상대는 중국입니다. 중국은 2년 전 달의 흙을 지구로 가져왔습니다. 또 달에 화물을 50톤 보낼 수 있는 로켓도 갖고 있습니다. 중국은 2030년이 되기 전에 달에 사람을 내릴 계획입니다. JTBC 김민입니다.
밤사이에 일어난 일입니다. 미국 항공우주국 나사가 현지 시간 어제 오전 11시 17분 아르테미스 1호 발사를 중단했습니다. 하마터면 큰일 날 뻔했습니다. 이 모든 준비가 끝나고 연료죠. 이 액체 수소를 로켓에 넣고 있었는데 이게 탱크에 들어가는 연료만요. 378만 리터나 되거든요. 이거를 넣던 중에 경보가 울려서 잠시 멈췄고 다시 주입을 시작했는데 이때 연료가 새기 시작한 겁니다. 결국 나사는 발사를 2시간 28분 53초 남기고 비행을 취소했습니다. 그런데 비슷한 일이 지난주에도 있었습니다. 그때도 거의 같은 결함이었습니다. 이번 발사 취소 직후에 이 나사 고위 관계자들이 기자회견을 열었는데 내용 한번 들어보겠습니다.
On Monday, it was a manageable leak. This was not a manageable leak.
Just remember, we're not going to launch until it's right. And that is standard operating procedure. And will continue to be.
네, 제가 전문가는 아니지만은 쉬운 문제 같지는 않습니다. 전문가들은 다음 발사가 빠르면 10월 혹은 연말쯤으로 보고 있습니다. 5조 원 넘게 들인 이번 프로젝트는요, 의미가 남다릅니다. 1972년이었죠. 미국은 아폴로 17호를 달로 보냈고 이후에 50년 만에 다시 유인 달 탐사를 하려는 겁니다. 그때에 비하면 우주과학은요 지금 비교할 수 없을 정도로 발전했습니다. 그럼에도 인간의 달 탐사는 이렇게나 참 어려운 일입니다. 50년 전 인류가 얼마나 대단한 일을 한 건지 세상 끼치게 되는 뉴스입니다.
1969년 달에 첫 발자국을 남긴 뒤 인류는 수십 년간 달을 탐사해 왔는데요. 이제 달의 우주 탐사를 위한 전신 기지를 만드는 작업을 시작합니다. 그 첫 작업으로 우리 시간 내일 밤 9시 반쯤 역사상 가장 강력한 로켓이 마네킹을 태우고 달로 출발합니다. 김민 기자입니다.
우주 발사 시스템이 발사대에 우뚝 서 있습니다. 거대한 로켓 1단 위에 우주선 오리온을 올렸는데 높이는 98m, 무게는 무려 2,500ton에 달합니다. 주 엔진은 우주왕복선에 썼던 엔진 4기를 묶었고 양쪽 옆엔 고체 부스터도 달았습니다. 이륙할 때 내는 힘만 4,000톤, 누리호 1단 엔진 13개를 합친 것보다 강력합니다. 27톤 이상의 많은 짐을 실어 달까지 보낼 수 있습니다. 다만 돈이 문제입니다. 한 번 발사에 5조 5천억 원이 듭니다. 이번 발사는 3단계 아르테미스 계획 중 첫 번째 임무입니다. 무인 우주선을 달 궤도로 보냈다가 지구로 돌아오는 210만 킬로미터의 여정입니다. 사람이 안 타지만 조종석엔 각종 센서를 단 3개의 마네킹이 탑니다.
그 당시에는 우주방사선이 사람한테 어떤 그 건강상의 문제를 일으킬지 모르니까 가능한 한 빨리 간 거고요. 이번엔 6주 정도 예상하고 있어요. 굉장히 오래 걸리잖아요. 마네킹에다가 방사선 센서를 달아서.
진짜 사람을 보내는 건 3년 뒤인 2025년. 비행사는 백인 남성이 아닌 여성과 유색인으로 결정했습니다. 한편 우주선 오리온은 우리 달궤도선 다누리를 만나지는 못합니다. 가는 궤적도 다른 데다 42일 만인 오는 10월 10일 지구로 돌아올 예정이기 때문입니다. 이제 우주 발사 시스템은 초읽기에 들어갔습니다. 날씨 등 큰 문제가 없다면 우리 시간 내일 밤 9시 반쯤 달나라로 향합니다. JTBC 김민희입니다.
앞으로 1시간 반쯤 뒤 미국에서 50년 만에 달에 사람을 보내기 위한 긴 여정이 시작됩니다. 3년 뒤에 사람을 태우고 떠나기 전에 오늘은 마네킹을 태운
coverage of Artemis 1, an uncrewed flight test that will return us to the moon in nearly 50 years. But you know, some might ask, why the moon? Well, here's why.
We are going. The history of this agency is marked with broken barriers, once viewed as impossible, with science fiction turned reality, with innovations that have spun industries all their own, and with demonstrations of peace for all humankind.
We soar in the skies of our home planet. We maintain a human presence just outside of gravity, and we touch points all across the solar system and beyond. We're going back to the moon, and this is why.
The moon is a treasure trove of science. It holds opportunities for us to make discoveries about our home planet, about our sun, and about our solar system.
The wealth of knowledge to be gleaned from the moon will inspire a new generation of thought and action.
Without fail, every major program and mission NASA has invested in has led to technologies and capabilities that have shaped our culture.
The breakthroughs of the Artemis era will define our generation and the generations to follow.
The tens of thousands of jobs associated with propelling us to the moon today are just the beginning of a lunar economy that will see hundreds of thousands of new jobs develop around the world.
This is not an ambition of one entity or one country. The exploration of the moon is a shared effort,
woven together by a desire for the greater good.
Why the moon? Because the missions of tomorrow will be sparked by the accomplishments of the Artemis generation today.
Because the ambition to go has already begun.
And because Mars is calling. We need to learn what it takes to establish a community on another cosmic shore. So let's camp close before pushing out.
And so, we go to the moon now, not as a series of isolated missions, but to build a community on and around the moon capable of proving how to live on other worlds.
We'll use the lessons from more than 50 years of peaceful exploration to send a new generation to the lunar surface to stay.
We will anchor our efforts on the lunar South Pole to establish the Artemis Base Camp,
positioning us for long-term science and exploration of the lunar surface.
We will prove what it takes to assemble a complex ship in deep space.
We will perfect descending down to and returning from a distant surface.
We will learn how humans can survive and thrive in a partial gravity environment.
With improved spacesuit designs, mobile habitats, and with reconnaissance robots pre-positioning and relocating supplies.
We will learn how to utilize the resources we find on these other worlds, starting with finding water ice and purifying it into drinkable water.
And refining that into hydrogen for fuel and oxygen to breathe.
We will establish fission power plants on the surface of the moon capable of supporting a growing community of efforts.
And we will expand the logistics supply chain to enable commercial and international partners
to resupply and refuel deep space outposts.
None of this is simple or easy, but nothing in our history ever has been.
The Eagle has landed. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
This kind of continuous lunar presence is a natural extension of all that we've learned in low Earth orbit. And what we will accomplish there will ensure the monumental missions to Mars are within reach. As we ready the launch of the first Artemis mission, and as commercial companies ready their lunar landers for the first private payload deliveries, we have already begun to take the next step.
Throughout this launch broadcast, our NASA's Leah Martin has been introducing us to people over at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex who have come out for hopefully the maiden voyage of Artemis 1. People from near and far, young and old, just really excited to hopefully see this historic flight. So now she's joined by somebody else who has a really interesting story. Leah, tell us about it.
Megan, I think one of the most exciting things about being here tonight is being with people who are like-minded, who have such a strong tie to the history of our nation's space program and their love of spaceflight. And I actually struck up an amazing conversation with Scott here, and you were telling me about the special tie that you have to tonight's launch as well.
Oh yeah, I literally grew up with NASA. My father went to work with the NACA before NASA. Went to work for Dr. von Braun, followed him over to Marshall Space Flight Center, and became, when it became NASA, he worked on the Jupiter C, Redstone, Saturn 1, Saturn 5, and then because of that, he brought me here to see Apollo 11 launch. So that was my first launch. I was 5 years old. I loved it. Still remember the sound. That's about all. And then years later, through my flying career, I was able to bring my sons back with my friends that flew the shuttle, and they saw 5 launches and 4 landings. But basically, I wanted to be here. I was here for the first moon launch, the last moon launch back when Uncle Gene Cernan, our family friend, went to on Apollo 17. So I wanted to be here for this because it's kind of in our family, in our blood. And hopefully I'll be around for the next one when we go and land again. So that's
incredible. So you have NASA actually in your DNA, grew up with the program.
Yeah. I knew most of the German scientists. The kids sat in our lap, Dr. Ernst Stirlinger, and my father flew with von Braun because he was a general aviation pilot as well. So they'd get off work and fly. And they were in Life magazine together, National Geographic. So it was fun. I literally knew Al Shepard, all the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo guys, and it was an honor. I would have loved to have been an astronaut, but I went a different route, and but I can still come here and see them.
We can, and we're so grateful, so thrilled to see you here tonight, and so excited that you will be able to actually compare the last launch and the sound of the last one with the one tonight. It's absolutely going to rock the sky.
I want it to be even louder. I want to feel it. Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's been an honor to meet you, and Megan, we're going back to you.
Leah, thank you so much for sharing that. That was such a fun story. Here we are now at Space Center Houston. This is a live look inside of the visitor center there. Lots of people hoping to see the launch today. I love this guy in the front with his NASA shirt representing. And again, just seeing children and young and old, just all these people who feel captivated and are excited about our next giant leap into deep space. So glad to have them here. Oh my gosh, I love this.
Yeah, the team in Marshall and Huntsville there is always ready for their shot, waving their flags. They're super pumped. That's the home to the SLS program office, so they have a dog in the fight tonight, seeing Artemis launch for the first time.
Is that an inflatable astronaut in the center. Do you see that? I think somebody is dressed up as an astronaut.
Look at that.
Yeah,
They're ready to
representing.
go.
I love this. Yeah, I'm so glad that they're there. Again, these visitor centers are closed to the public, but you know, the people there decided to hold a watch party.
Oh,
and
look,
that's
our
exciting
friends in
to see.
Germany are ready for us this time.
I know,
They
clapping.
anticipated the delay. They look pumped and ready to go.
So these are employees of Airbus. Airbus is the main contractor for the European Space Agency, and together they provided the European service module for the Orion spacecraft. So really, we should be applauding them. They shouldn't be applauding. Thank you so much, guys, for your contribution to the program, and can't wait to see Orion and SLS launch. Okay, so now let's head back over to Daryl Nail over with the launch team so we can hear any updates about a new T0.
Yeah, Megan, thank you. And a clearer picture is starting to emerge as the launch team now reports out that they only have a few minutes left of work to do before they're ready to pick up polling. And we're also hearing that some of that polling, which kicks off with the mission management team, is also now just about 3.5 minutes away. Now, we are currently still in that hold. But the launch team, NASA's test director, is continuing to move the team forward. We've wrapped up work on the upper stage and the lower stage. You're looking now live inside Firing Room 1, where Launch Director Charlie Blackwell Thompson is overseeing her launch team. We've had a number of delays that have put us off the T0, but we are starting to track to a T0 close to around a quarter till, top of the hour. But we do need to have some polling that takes place. I'm pausing now because I'm listening in to the teams as they communicate. In this launch window, which we're currently 26 minutes into, and it's 2 hours long, it runs until 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time, we have what's called 40 cutouts. And in those cutouts, they range from about a second to about a minute. These are times where they can't launch. These cutouts must be accounted for when determining a new T0. The upper stage of the rocket, which was the last to get ready and configured, just recently the team cycled the liquid hydrogen valves, which is required, and they are currently working on the LO2 valves, liquid oxygen valves in the upper stage. That work is almost done. We are now a minute and a half away from the poll of the mission management team, which is several minutes before T-minus 15 minutes. When that poll starts, we'll get a clearer picture of our T0. NASA's test director has informed the launch team to all switch to a common communication channel. It's called 232. And what this means is that the entire launch team is now on one channel, and all future communication will happen there. Whereas there are many channels. Now they reduce it down to one. Just heard from NASA test director Carlos Monge. I'm sorry, Jeff Spalding. Jeff Spalding's on. They swapped out. There are currently no constraints to launch. Great news. Again, no constraints to launch. And they're getting ready to pick up with a poll to determine readiness for launch. Okay, NASA Test Director Jeff Spaulding getting ready to conduct the readiness poll, so we are getting close. We're going to pull up the audio now so that you can listen in.
LPs go. And rock. Rockets go. All right, copy all. And Launch Director NTD, our launch team is ready to proceed at this time.
I copy all NTD. At this time, I will proceed with my poll. And attention on 232, this is the Launch Director performing the final poll for launch. Verify no constraints and go for launch. EGS Program Chief Engineer.
EGS Program Chief Engineer verifies that the EGS, SLS, and Orion Program Chief Engineers have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, Greg. Thank you. EGS Chief Safety Officer.
The EGS CSO verifies the SLS, Orion, and EGS CSOs have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, John. Thank you. Range Weather.
Weather has no constraints and weather is go for launch.
Copy, LWO. And Mission Manager. And Mission Manager, Launch Director.
Launch Director, Mission Manager on 232. The mission management team has been polled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count and launch of Artemis 1.
I copy all. Thank you. And NTD, Launch Director.
Go ahead, Launch Director.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. At this time, I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis 1.
Copy, Launch Director, and thank you. All right, we do have a couple of steps to configure, and then we will be ready to resume the clock. CVSE, NTD.
CVSE here.
Initiate recording of Orion cameras at this time.
In work.
R, NTD.
RSR here.
Perform the booster ignition SNA arm rotation enable.
NDT, RSR, booster ignition SNA arm and rotation enable is complete.
And I copy. Thank you.
Okay, so there you heard the poll from Launch Director
Early.
getting ready to get that new T0 time. The poll that you heard was the NASA Test Director's poll. And
all right, and we have verified no cutouts at this time. And all personnel, we are going to resume the clock. GLS, you can resume the clock on your mark.
GLS copies. Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. GLS mainline has been initiated.
Okay.
T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
We are T-minus 10 minutes away from liftoff of Artemis 1. As you can see, the clock is now moving. Let's put that up. T-minus 9 minutes and 47 seconds. The L-minus 15 poll complete.
Show
They went
06:47:44 is the new liftoff time.
Affirm.
Okay.
Oh 01:47:44, 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time and 44 seconds. We went straight into terminal count. Liftoff now 9 minutes away. So terminal count. Control has been given over to the GLS, the Ground Launch Sequencer, a computer and software that is doing all of the commanding and monitoring of the Space Launch System. We'll hear call-outs from the GLS operator, Alex Pandalos. As well as NASA Test Director Jeff Spaulding. GLS is pre-tensioning the umbilicals at this very moment. You can see them as they run down the rocket. That's getting them ready to detach. At liftoff, those arms will swing away. We'll let go of the rocket in a clockwise direction. T-minus 8 minutes and counting. The GLS is performing up to 100 commands per second, including configuring ground systems for power transfer to the rocket. GLS is turning on cameras, recording video inside and outside the crew module to collect data for engineers. Purging the aft skirt booster with high flow nitrogen. Clear out any hydrogen gas that may be there. You can see the crew access arm is already retracted. When there is crew during Artemis 2, it would happen at T-minus 6 minutes. But out of abundance of caution, they went ahead and retracted the arm well ahead of liftoff. Want to point your attention to the base of the mobile launcher. If something wasn't done to reduce the power from the pressure caused by the rocket's ignition and thunderous sound, it could damage the rocket. So the ignition overpressure and sound suppression system will flood the mobile launcher with water. You'll see that sequence start at T-minus 17 seconds. Now coming up in less than 30 seconds, the ground launch sequencer will start bringing the high energy systems online, starting with core stage pressurization. Firing room 1 is completely silent as they listen for the next call.
GLS is go for core stage tank pressurization.
The core stage tank is now pressurizing to flight levels. The replenish valve to the liquid hydrogen tank now closing. The liquid oxygen tank will come a little later. Now we're arming the Orion ascent pyros and transfer to internal power. The launch abort system, or LAS jettison motor, is now armed. On this flight, the abort motor is inactive because there is no crew on board. Up next is the flight termination system, or FTS, which gives the Space Force the ability to destruct the rocket if it goes in the wrong direction. Let's listen in for that.
GLS is go for FTS arm.
The flight termination system is now armed. Coming up at 4 minutes and 40 seconds, a big moment. This is where the RS-25 engines and their bleed go to high flow. It's been a little tricky to dial in.
GLS is go for LH2 high flow bleed check.
Good word, we've passed that. The cryo team got the LH2 engine bleed pressure loop dialed in. They are now at the right temperature for launch. Countdown continues. T-minus 4 minutes, 15 seconds. Up next, GLS fires up the CAPUs. Those are high-speed turbines which provide pressure to hydraulic pumps that steer the RS-25s. Stands for Core Stage Auxiliary Power Unit Start.
GLS is go for core stage APU start.
That now leads to the thrust vector control test at T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That can proceed now, and we will see the engines gimbal at the bottom of the core stage. At T-minus 3 minutes and 10 seconds, you will hear the go for purge sequence 4. That's a helium purge of the 4 core stage engines downstream of the propellant valve, getting the air and moisture out.
GLS is go for purge sequence 4.
And in just a few seconds, GLS will close the core stage LOX vent, liquid oxygen. The white vapor cloud caused from the super cold gaseous oxygen condensing the water in the atmosphere will disappear. You see it coming out there now. And there it goes, it's closed. LOX vent closed, pressure rising in the core stage LOX tank to flight levels. Coming up in 15 seconds, look for that thrust vector control actuator test. Engines will gimbal. And there they go. The 4 core stage RS-25 engines gimbaling around, testing the ability to steer the rocket into space. They will operate at 109% performance. Each RS-25 throwing down 500,000 pounds of thrust. All 4, 2 million pounds. All together with the boosters, 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
GLS is go for upper stage to internal power.
Now the upper stage has gone to internal power. So power is removed from the rocket's upper stage, the ICPS, and it's been switched to battery power. The same milestone is coming up for the core stage at T-minus 1 minute and 30 seconds.
GLS is go for core stage to internal power.
The rocket's core stage, which houses the 3 flight computers, is now on battery power. So there is no more hold time available because there's no more margin on the batteries. So if we have a hold, we'd have to recycle back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries. The count continues. A note now, shortly after liftoff.
1 minute.
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control of the rocket, and my colleague, Leah Cheshire, will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS will hand off control to the ALS. This is the autonomous launch sequencer. On board the rocket, it will take over command and control of the rocket. But the ALS will check, make sure there's no holds coming from the ground up until T-minus 2 seconds.
GLS is go for ALS.
And we are go for ALS. The Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. Launch team can no longer recycle the count. Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML. And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. Core stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops in Mission Control. The 4 core stage engines are throttling down ahead of passing through max Q. Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter. Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated. And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members, we just heard the call for 3 engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange. We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. So far, we've had a clean ascent. We saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good. Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour. Again, 4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines. The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight. Five minutes, 42 seconds into the mission, we are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying free. Now traveling over 10,000 miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight. About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire at maximum thrust. Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control Houston. As we prepare for main engine cutoff, the 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down. "30 seconds now until core stage main engine cutoff. All 4 engines continue to throttle down. Now 7 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight, traveling over 16,000 miles per hour. Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff. And we have confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion is now in Earth's orbit. The flight dynamics officer reports that we have a nominal main engine cutoff. And we just heard the call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about what it was like to hear the rocket roar off the launch pad. Megan and Kayla, I've got to hear all about it.
Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we just watched Artemis 1 launch, our first step towards our next adventure into deep space. As Leah said, I'm NASA's Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Barron. And I'm kind of still giddy and speechless. I don't even know how to explain how I'm feeling right now.
I feel the same way. This is the first launch that I've been able to watch in person. And I've got to say, it was incredible. It took my breath away and I was tearing up. Just what an amazing accomplishment for this team, this international team, people who have been dedicating their careers to getting this rocket off the ground and taking the first step to getting a crew on that vehicle back to the moon. It was just incredible.
Yeah, this is a moment I think that we're all going to remember where we were when we saw this sort of thing, you know what I mean? And it was great to see, again, when we entered into terminal count, everybody here just started cheering, you know, coming out to get a really good view. And boy, I mean, it lit up the night sky and it just shook everything around us. Did you feel that? Like in my bones, I felt that.
Oh yeah, the cool thing is just kind of the delay between what you see and what
Yes.
you hear, because of course the sound travels a little bit slower, and it was just amazing. The ground shook. We could hear the thrust pushing that rocket into space. 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
Yes.
It's incredible. It was
Yeah.
amazing to see here live in person.
How does it compare? So this is your first launch on the ground. How does it compare to your launch when you're in the capsule soaring towards space?
I mean, equally emotional, I think.
Yeah.
We train for everything, and so when we're in that capsule waiting for launch, we're just running our procedures. You could almost, trick us and say that we were in the simulator and it wasn't real. But like in that moment of liftoff, when the thrust builds underneath you, like we saw it today, it's just hard not to be overwhelmed by the emotional experience, the excitement, the joy of that moment. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think we can't say it enough. This team really deserved this moment. They've been working so hard for this moment. When I heard that we got into terminal count, it was, I felt a sense of relief and excitement for them that I think everybody here did. We really wanted them to succeed. We really wanted to see the launch today. And wow, I will never forget this.
Me neither. It was an incredible experience to be here and see that happen.
Yeah. Was there anything that was particularly surprising to you? Again, this is your first launch. What were you expecting?
I think we also had a nighttime launch for our launch. And so I think one thing you underestimate is how much it lights up the night sky.
Yes.
We were able to watch it all the way through that trajectory. We were able to see the boosters separate and everything. So it was just an incredible view. It's amazing how much you get to see of the flight path when it's at night and sliding up the sky.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed this, but we see the moon here, and the trajectory of the rocket looked like it was flying towards me. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, that's so poetic. It's so beautiful. I'm so glad we launched today.
Yeah.
Wow.
Congratulations
absolutely.
to the team. It's
So
incredible.
we're going to head over to Daryl, who was at the launch team. Daryl, you got to count us down through that, through liftoff. I mean, how was that being in the launch control center with them?
Well, Megan, it was something else. I got to tell you, you're looking live inside the firing room where Charlie Blackwell-Thompson is about to address her team after a whole lot of hard work and preparation to get to this moment. Let's stand by and listen to her now.
Comm check. But you can't hear it in the room. Can you guys hear me? No.
Hey, Jeremy, can you see if you could turn something on to answer the microphone? The press site can hear me, but
The room can't. The room can't. You can hear me? Because the guys... I don't know what he's telling me to do. My team can't hear me, so I'm... Yeah, somehow the team can't hear me with the mic, so I don't...
Is here.
Can you guys hear me?
Pam Melroy.
Oh, there we go. Is he ready for me? Well, for once, I might be speechless. So you guys know I have talked a lot about appreciating the moment that you're in. And we have worked hard as a team. You guys have worked hard as a team for this moment. This is your moment. It is not by chance that you are here today. So I want you to look around at this team and know that you have earned it. You have earned your place in the room. You have earned this moment. You have earned your place in history. You were part of a first. Doesn't come along very often. Once in a career, maybe. But we are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis. The first step in returning our country to the moon and on to Mars. What you have done today will inspire generations to come. So thank you. Thank you for your resilience. You know, I said at the pre-test briefing, the harder the climb, the better the view. We showed the Space Coast tonight. What a beautiful view it is. So congratulations.
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control of the rocket,
So we got a couple
and my
of
colleague,
traditions here
Leah Cheshire,
in
will
launch
take over
control.
commentary. T-minus 50
And
seconds
the
and
first
counting.
one is
Coming up at T-minus
when you're
33
in
seconds,
position for
the
the first
GLS will
time,
hand off control to the ALS.
you get a
This is the
tie
autonomous launch sequencer.
And
On board the
so
rocket, it will take over command and control of the rocket. But the ALS will check, make sure there's no holds coming from the ground
And
up
I'm
until
gonna get my
T-minus
tie
5.
cut by a couple of
And we are
legends
go
that are
for
here.
ALS. The Space Launch
And
System
then
is
anyone
now
who wants
counting
their
down to
tie cut
liftoff of
will be
Orion
making
on
the
its
rounds
maiden
in the
voyage to the
firing
moon.
room. You got your console chiefs if they want to do it.
Launch
That's
team can
fine.
no
If you
longer
want me
cycle
to
the
do
count.
it, you might have to wait a little while, but I'll stay all
Sound
night if I
suppressor
have
water
to.
now
It'll be my
flowing under the
pleasure
ML.
to cut ties.
And here we
So
go.
I'm going to take care of
Hydrogen
mine, and then I
burnoff
have one
igniters
other
initiate.
presentation
7,
that I want to
6,
make this evening.
5, 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1.
This is Charlie Blackwell
First milestone
Thompson, Artemis 1 launch director. She just got her tie cut. That is a tradition
This is the
here
greatest
at
period of
NASA.
atmospheric force on the rocket.
We just got to hear her talk to the team, and one thing that really stuck out to me that she said is that they really earned their place in history. We're coming up on
SLS
solar
now
array
traveling
deploy. Let's go on to
607
Leah.
miles per hour. Thanks, Megan. And yes, we're here in Mission Control Houston, still monitoring the Artemis 1 mission, the first flight of Orion atop the Space Launch System. So far, we saw successful liftoff at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time, all the way through separation from the core stage. We now have Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage flying free. And we've just heard that we have initiated solar array deploy. So we are turning our focus to that. The spacecraft was running on battery power, but stretching these wings will allow it to start relying on those batteries and significantly extend the time it can stay in space. So solar array deploy takes about 12 minutes. We have 4 solar arrays that we need to deploy and latch. These will provide power to the spacecraft on its journey to distant retrograde orbit about 30 seconds from Earth. Once these are properly configured again, Orion will no longer need to rely solely on battery power. And we expect this to be done about now 60 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Orion is now traveling 17,175 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter. We're continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston from the flight controllers monitoring the mission. A little bit about these solar arrays as we wait. Again, we heard the call that the deploy has been initiated. Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated. These 177-foot boosters fold. These 4 solar arrays generate 11 kilowatts of power, which is enough electricity to power 2 RS-25 engines firing, and they have a wingspan of 60,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 6.5-foot panels has 1,250
2 minutes and 36 seconds
so you're
into
looking
the
at
flight.
a total of 15,000 solar
Hearing nominal
cells.
calls here in Mission Control Houston.
Now we just heard the call that
We've
all
still
four
got
solar
4 good
arrays
engines
have
on the
been
core
released.
stage.
So we initially
Next up
heard
will
the
be looking for the service module fairing to separate.
This is
Now
3
those 4
15 by
solar arrays
15
are
foot fairing
released.
panels,
Again, this is about
providing
a
structural
12-minute
support,
process.
protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and
The solar
11
arrays will
seconds
deploy
into flight,
straight,
and very
and you're
shortly
getting a live
thereafter
view
will be
right now.
followed
This is really
by the launch
exciting.
abort system
They'll
separation.
eventually be swept back against the vehicle prior to translunar injection burn
Just
to
over
prevent
3
any
minutes
loads
into the flight of
from
Artemis
breaking
1,
or
now
damaging
traveling
the
over
arrays.
4,060
And on the end
miles
of each
per
solar
hour,
array is a
83 miles
camera that will
downrange.
capture imagery for us throughout the mission.
We just
along
had confirmation
with a few
that the
other
service
cameras
module
placed
fairing
outside
has
and inside the
separated.
spacecraft to help us monitor and perform various other inspections. And that the launch abort system pyros
Of course,
have
if you
fired,
recall the Apollo
separating
capsule
those
design,
from
there
Orion
weren't
as
solar
well.
arrays.
We had fuel
For
cells
future crew
instead. So this design with arrays gives us the opportunity to stay in orbit longer, since we practically have no limit to the energy available for use from the sun.
Coming
We just
up
heard the
on
call for
21
3-engine
minutes
press,
since
meaning
liftoff.
if SLS were to lose an engine
Orion
at this
is
point in
attached
the
to the
mission, we
interim
could still
cryogenic
achieve
propulsion
stage. You can
Shortly
see those
after
4 solar
liftoff, Mission
arrays
Control Houston will take
unfolding
control of the
now.
rocket, and
And
my
again, Artemis
colleague
1 is a
Leah
flight test.
Cheshire
It's
will
paving
take
the
over
way for a
commentary.
sustainable presence
T-minus
at the moon.
50 seconds
Looking
and
forward to
counting.
the future gateway will be
Coming
our
up at
space station
T-minus
in lunar
33
orbit.
seconds,
And we have
the
some
GLS will
similarities
hand
and
off control
differences
to
in
the
the solar
ALS.
arrays
This is the
unfolding right
autonomous
now
launch
on Orion
sequencer
and
on
those that'll
board
be
the
on
rocket. It will
Gateway.
take over
So like
command
we're
and
seeing
control
now, these are
of the
deploying
rocket.
autonomously.
But the ALS
The
will
Gateway
check,
solar
make
arrays
sure there's
will
no
as
holds
well.
coming from the ground up until T-minus 2
And while
seconds.
these generate those
And we
11
are go for
kilowatts of
ALS.
power, the 2
The Space
rollout
Launch
solar
System
arrays, or
is
ROSAs,
now
on Gateway
counting down to
will
liftoff
generate
of Orion on
60
its maiden
kilowatts
voyage
of
to the
power.
moon.
That ROSA design is currently being tested aboard the space station.
Launch team
we have
can no
2 new
longer
ones
cycle the
installed
count.
and a spacewalk conducted earlier today,
Sound
preparing
suppressor
for
water now
another
flowing
set.
under the ML. And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6,
Coming up on
5,
22 minutes since
4-stage
liftoff
engine
today,
start.
Orion and the interim
3,
cryogenic
2,
propulsion stage
1.
traveling
Boosters
over
in ignition.
16,800 miles
And
per
liftoff
hour.
of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon
The
and
solar arrays
beyond.
deploying now are part of the European service module. It's comprised of 20,000 parts and components. The service module was developed as part of an agreement between NASA and the European Space Agency, solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. This is the first time NASA is using a European-built system as a critical element to power an American spacecraft. Good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops in mission control. The 4 core stage engines are throttling down ahead of passing through max Q. Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Spacecraft now traveling at 16,500 miles per hour around the Earth. We are in solar array
Standing
deployed,
by
and
for
we have
solid rocket
confirmation
booster
all
jettison
4
and shortly
arrays are
thereafter.
deployed. Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage
Coming up in a little
continues
less
to
than
power
30
the
minutes
flight
is
of
the Peerage
Orion,
raise
all
maneuver.
4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston.
We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated. And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members, and with our launch at 1:41 Eastern Time this morning, we are looking for a perigee raise maneuver about 53 minutes into today's flight. Again, we are now 25 minutes and 47 engine press into the flight,
SLS were
and
to
we
lose
have
an
an engine at this point in the mission. We could still achieve solar arrays.
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control
Orion's
Houston will
journey
take
to the
control of
moon
the rocket,
continues
and
as
my colleague,
planned. Again,
Leah
looking
Cheshire, will
forward
take
to
over
that perigee
commentary.
raise maneuver.
T-minus 50
That'll be coming
seconds
up
and counting.
again at about 53
Coming
minutes
up at T-minus
into
33
the mission,
seconds,
so
the
about
GLS will hand off
27
control to
minutes
the
from
ALS.
now.
This is the
During the
autonomous launch
perigee raise maneuver,
sequencer.
the interim
On board the
cryogenic
rocket,
propulsion
it will
stage
take
will use
over
its
command and
RL-10
control
engine to lift the
of the
lowest
rocket.
point of Orion in
But the
Earth's
ALS
orbit.
will check.
The
Make sure
current
there's no
orbit is
holds
more of an
coming from
oval
the
shape
ground
than a
up
perfect
until
circle, and this
T-minus
burn will
50.
raise that point
And we
closest
are
to
go
Earth
for
and make
ALS.
the orbit more
The Space
circular.
Launch System
This will
is
also
now
include a checkout
counting
of
down
Orion's
to
systems
liftoff of
and any
Orion on its
adjustments
maiden
to the
voyage
solar
to the moon.
arrays. It'll be a short burn, less than 30 seconds long, but
Launch
critical
team
to
can no
keep us
longer
on
cycle the
track.
count.
And it also prepares us for the next engine burn
Sound
to send
suppressor water
Orion
now
to the
flowing
moon. That's
under
the
the ML.
translunar injection burn. That'll come up a little
And
later,
here we
which
go.
is a longer burn.
Hydrogen
Another
burn-off
firing of
igniters
the RL-10
initiate.
engine on
7,
the interim cryogenic
6,
propulsion stage.
5, 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
We caught a glimpse there of those solar arrays, and with all 4 solar arrays properly deployed, Orion's journey to the moon continues.
All 4 RS-25
We've got
engines
more
on the core
operational
stage and 2
updates
solid
coming up
rocket
shortly,
boosters
but
for
for now,
propelling the
I'm going to
vehicle
toss
at
it back to
128
Megan
miles
Kayla
per
at
hour.
Kennedy.
Leah, thank you so much. Our return to the moon will be different than the last
Carrying
time. We
good
plan to
control on the
explore
roll from
more of
teams
the
in Mission
lunar
Control
surface
Houston.
and
All good
learn how
calls
to
so
live
far.
and
Now
work
30
there.
seconds
With
into
more on
the
our
flight of Artemis
destination,
1.
let's bring back NASA's Dan
First
Hewitt.
milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max
Thanks,
Q at about
Megan.
1 minute and 9
I gotta
seconds
be
into
honest,
launch.
ran
This is the
outside to
greatest
catch
period
it.
of
I'm
atmospheric
still
force on the
shaking
rocket.
a little bit. That never gets old. That is always one of the coolest things you'll ever see in your entire life. And that
SLS now
rocket
traveling
was massive
607
and
miles
loud.
per hour.
So, all right, the moon. This is why we call it the moon board, but the moon, you know, since the dawn of time, humans have looked at the sky and shouted at our neighbor, I'm going to walk in your face. And in the 60s, we actually did it. 6 times, starting with Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Apollo 11, 1969, followed by 5 more successive landings, each time delivering 2 human beings to the surface of the moon. Our last one was Apollo 17, and that was 1972, Gene Cernan and Harrison Smith stepping off for the last time. Now, we have not sent humans back since then, but they
The next
accomplished
major
a lot
milestone
on
will
Apollo.
be for
Lots of
the solid
technological
rocket boosters to
advancements,
cut off and
deployed
jettison
science
about 2
instruments,
minutes
brought back
and 11
hundreds of
seconds into
pounds
the flight,
of
so
lunar
about 30
rocks
seconds
and
from now.
regolith teaching us about the
Again,
moon
quiet
and
here
also
in
about
Mission
our
Control
place
Houston
in the
as
solar
teams
system.
continue
The moon
monitoring
is
the flight
fascinating
of Artemis 1.
because it doesn't have a lot of the
We're
geological
now 16
processes
miles
we have
downrange from
here
the
on
launch pad
Earth.
at Kennedy
You don't
Space
have
Center,
erosion,
traveling
you
over
don't have wind and
2,800
water
miles per
wearing down
hour.
rocks. You don't have plate tectonics that are constantly recycling the crust. And so
Standing by for
everything out
solid
there is
rocket
really
booster
old.
jettison,
In
and
fact,
shortly
one of the
thereafter.
rocks brought back on Apollo 15 called the Genesis rock was dated to be 4 billion years old. So from the primordial beginnings of our solar system. But as
Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters.
Spacewalks in just hours. With Artemis,
Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange.
Now, why? So we haven't sent people since the 70s
2 minutes
to the moon,
and 36
but we haven't
seconds
stopped
into the
studying
flight.
it. We've had
Hearing
orbiters,
nominal calls
like
here
the
in
Lunar
Mission Control
Reconnaissance
Houston.
Orbiter, which is literally
We've
just
still
been
got 4
flying
good
loops
engines on the
around
core
moon,
stage.
taking
Next up, we'll be looking for the
high-resolution
service
images
module
of the
fairing to
surface.
separate.
So
This is
high
3 15
resolution
by
that
15
you
foot
can look
fairing
them up.
panels,
They have images
providing
of all the
structural
different
support,
Apollo
protecting
landing
the
sites,
service
and you can
module.
actually
Those
see
will
the
separate about
footprints,
3 minutes and
the
11
paths
seconds
they
into
left from
flight,
the
and
lunar
very
regolith
shortly
of
thereafter
those
will be
sites.
followed
We
by the
had a
launch
mission
abort
called
system
L-Cross,
separation.
which slammed a probe into a crater on the moon, sending out material.
Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange.
And through missions like that and others,
We just
we've
had
been able to
confirmation that
find
the service
that
module
there is
fairing has
water ice
separated.
trapped in those permanently shadowed areas on the moon. A lot of them center around that South Pole.
And
we
that
have
the launch
already
abort system
identified
pyros have fired,
13
separating those from
potential
Orion as
landing
well.
sites for
For
the
future crew
Artemis 3 mission. And these are where we're going to send our astronauts around the lunar South Pole to access that water ice. Now, why water? Why are we caring about water? Well, it serves a lot of purposes. Obviously, for
We just heard the
humans,
call for
you
3
need that
engine
to
press,
breathe.
meaning
You
if
can split
SLS
water
were to lose
apart,
an
get
engine at this
oxygen
point in the
for
mission, we
breathing
could
gas
still
for an
achieve.
atmosphere. If you have
Shortly
lunar
after
base,
liftoff,
you can
Mission
split it
Control
into
Houston will
oxygen
take
and
control of the rocket,
hydrogen. That's
and my
rocket fuel.
colleague,
We just
Leah
launched
Cheshire,
the
will
most
take over
powerful rocket
commentary.
in history
T-minus 50
using
seconds
those
and counting.
constituent parts.
Coming
And
up
so
at
you can
T-minus
start to
33
live off
seconds,
the land.
the
You
GLS
can
will
use
hand off
that,
control to the
something called
ALS.
in-situ
This is the
resource
autonomous launch
utilization.
sequencer.
And
On
really,
board the rocket,
the
it
whole
will
point
take
of
over
that is to
command and
use the
control
moon as this
of the
proving
rocket.
ground.
But
We're
the
trying
ALS will
to get
check,
to Mars.
make sure there's no
We're trying to learn
holds
to
coming
live
from
on
the
other
ground
planets
up
where
until
there
T-minus
is
2
gravity,
seconds.
Go for
where we're
ALS.
going to
And we
have
are
to
go for
use
ALS.
resources there
The Space
on
Launch
the ground
System
because we won't
is
be able to
now
bring
counting down
everything
to
with us.
liftoff of
And by
Orion
going
on
to
its
the lunar
maiden
South
voyage
Pole,
to the
by
moon.
going to stay under Artemis, we're going to be able to start practicing that.
Launch team
We're
can
gonna
no longer
perfect
cycle the
those
count.
systems, perfect those techniques and operations we need
Sound
to do
suppression
that,
water now
so we
flowing
can use
under the
moon
ML.
as that jumping off point to Mars and beyond.
And here we
So,
go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off
why
igniters
the moon.
initiate.
We're going to see
7,
Orion fly
6,
around it for the very first
5,
time in just a couple
4
of days.
stage engine start.
That launch was spectacular.
3,
I'm
2,
still way
1.
too excited.
Boosters in ignition.
But can't wait to see some
And
shots of the
liftoff
moon
of
from up
Artemis
close
1.
from Orion.
We
So I'll send it
rise
back over to you,
together
Megan.
back to the moon and beyond.
Thanks so much, Dan. So right now we're actually joined by members of the Red Crew. You'll remember from watching the launch coverage that the Red Crew was sent out by the launch
All 4
team.
RS-25 engines on the core stage
identified
and 2
a
solid
small
rocket
leak
boosters
on
now
a
propelling the
hydrogen
vehicle
valve
at
inside of the
128
mobile
miles per
launcher.
hour.
Well, now here they are. This is Trent and Trent. Can you just introduce everybody else here on your
Good
team?
control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1.
Experienced hydrogen tech.
First milestone will be for
And
the
the three
vehicle
of
to
you
pass
guys
the max
really,
Q in about 1
I would
minute
say,
and 9 seconds
saved the
into
day
launch.
today.
This is
I
the
mean,
greatest
really, you guys had
period
to
of
go in there
atmospheric
to
force
what's
on the
called
rocket.
blast danger zone. You guys are specially trained to be able to do operations on the pad while cryo is loading.
SLS
Talk
now
to us
traveling
about
607
getting that
miles per
call,
hour.
being told, hey, you guys need to go in there. And it was the first time for all 3 of you.
Yeah, all I could say is we were very excited.
You're looking at
I was ready to get up there and go.
Really? How are you guys feeling?
Very comfortable, very confident in the test team and the procedures and our training. We did a great job.
Walk us. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
How gratifying it must be for you guys, because you train for this eventuality but don't always get to do it. Billy was saying that he's been a Red Crew team member for 37 years, and this is the first time he's been called to go into the blast danger zone. So I know for us, when we're training for all of these eventualities, whether it's a spacewalk, robotics operations, you really want to put that training into practice. How do you guys feel like it went today?
Amazing. I still
The
can't
next
believe
major
it.
milestone will be
It's
for
surreal to
the
me.
solid rocket boosters to cut off
Insane.
and jettison
Yeah,
about
kind
2
of walk
minutes
us through
and
what
11
you were
seconds
thinking.
into
So
the
you
flight,
get
so
there,
about 30
and
seconds from
what,
now.
is it just like game time and you're really
Again,
focused?
quiet here
or,
in Mission Control
you know,
Houston
how are
as
you
teams continue
feeling?
monitoring the flight of
Yeah, I'd
Artemis
say
1.
we were very focused.
We're now
on
16
what was
miles
happening
downrange
up
from the
there,
launch pad at
just
Kennedy
making
Space Center,
sure
traveling over
we knew what was
2,800 miles per
happening.
hour.
Because the rocket's, it's alive, it's creaking, it's making venting noises, it's
Standing by
it's
for
pretty
solid
scary.
rocket booster
So
jettison
on
and
zero
shortly
deck,
thereafter.
my heart was pumping, my nerves were going, but but yeah, we showed up today. I think as soon as we walked up the stairs, we were ready to rock and roll.
And they were telling us a bit about it while you were
Confirmation that
working
these
on it.
solid
You guys
rocket
were actually
boosters
just
have
torquing
separated
down
these
the valve
177-foot
to prevent
boosters.
or reduce the leak rate or stop the leak. Is
Now
that
the
right?
core stage continues to
Just
power
the
the
packing
flight of
gland is
Orion,
a little
all four
loose, so went up
RS-25
there and
engines
tightened her up.
firing, traveling over
You're probably still
3,400
like
miles
in
per
this,
hour,
oh my
46
gosh,
miles
moment,
downrange.
like all of us are. You know, has it actually hit you, like the role
2
you
minutes and
played
36
today
seconds
in making
into the
Artemis
flight.
1 launch?
Hearing
You know,
nominal
I still
calls here in
can't
Mission
believe
Control
it.
Houston.
Like, it's
We've still got
like
4
I said,
good
it's
engines on the
surreal
core
and just
stage.
amazing.
Next up, we'll be looking for the service
don't
module
know
fairing
about
to
you guys,
separate.
but-
This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing
nodding
panels,
along behind you,
providing structural
for sure.
support, protecting the service
anything you wanna
module.
say to
Those
the
will
launch team?
separate
Again,
about
this is a
3
big
minutes and
day
11
for
seconds
the
into
launch
flight,
team,
and
for
very
you
shortly
guys,
thereafter will be
NASA,
followed
but
by
really
the launch
whole
abort
world.
system
I mean,
separation.
This is a historic launch that I think we'll all remember. We'll all remember, really.
Just over 3 minutes into the flight of
You
Artemis
know, we
1,
had
now
a
traveling
lot of
over
people here
4,060
helping us
miles
out,
per
a lot
hour,
of teams,
83 miles
flying room.
downrange.
I'm sure that was hectic.
We just had
And,
confirmation that the
you know,
service
NASA,
module fairing
Boeing,
has separated.
All the other companies did a great job, and we're glad to be part of it.
One thing I always like to say is spaceflight is
And
a
that the
team
launch abort
sport,
system
and I think you
pyros
guys
have fired,
perfectly demonstrated
separating
that
those
today, right?
from
Like
Orion as
none of
well.
us could accomplish this on
For
our
future
own.
crew
It takes a really complex team. Nobody can be an expert in all of the systems, all the technology, all the workarounds we might have to do to get a rocket off the pad. So thank you for the role you played in that team today. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
We
I
just heard the
appreciate you
call for
coming by to
3
talk
engine
with us.
press, meaning if
All right,
SLS
it's now
were
been
to
about
lose an engine
35
at this
minutes
point in
since
the mission,
liftoff
we
of
could still
Artemis
achieve
1.
it.
Orion
Shortly
and
after
ICPS
liftoff,
are now
Mission
free
Control
flying,
Houston
so let's
will
head
take
back
control
to
of the
Leah
rocket,
again to talk
and
about
my
how the
colleague,
journey is going
Leah
so far.
Cheshire, will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds
Thanks,
and counting.
Megan. And it has been a pretty smooth
Coming up at
ride so
T-minus
far.
33
And
seconds,
we
the
are
GLS
now,
will
again,
hand
like
off
you
control
mentioned,
to
coming
the
up on
ALS.
36
This is
minutes
the
since
autonomous launch
That puts
sequencer.
us
On
about
board the rocket,
17
it will
minutes into
take
the
over
perigee
command and
until the
control
perigee raise
of the
maneuver.
rocket.
That's going to be
But
the
the
maneuver
ALS
that
will
lifts
check.
the
Make sure
lowest
there's no
point of
holds
Orion's
coming from
orbit
the ground
around the
up
Earth
until
and puts
T-minus
us where we
50.
need to
Go
be
for ALS.
ahead of
And
the
we are go for
translunar
ALS.
injection burn.
The space launch
translunar
system
injection burn
is
is that
now
really
counting
long
down
burn
to
that we're going to need
liftoff
to
of
send us
Orion on
on
its maiden
to
voyage
the
to the
moon.
moon.
So we've been treated to some exciting views from the spacecraft
Launch team
today,
can no longer cycle the count.
including, and we hope to see some from inside the cabin.
Sound suppressor water
but
now
we
flowing
expect to
under the
continue
ML.
receiving photo updates throughout the mission.
And here
it
we
takes
go.
a team, though,
10.
to bring the
Hydrogen
imagery
burn-off
of Orion
igniters
down to
initiate.
Earth. So let's
7,
meet them.
6, 5. 4-stage engine start.
The imagery that we're collecting
3,
on Artemis 1
2,
and the mission
1.
itself
Boosters in
is
ignition.
preparing to carry humans
And
to
liftoff
the
of
moon.
Artemis 1.
The Orion
We
imagery
rise
team is going to be
together
monitoring
back
every
to the
aspect
moon
of
and
visual
beyond.
spacecraft performance for the entire duration of the mission. The first time that we're going to be live streaming digital video from its spacecraft back down to the Earth from the vicinity
All
of the
4
moon. That's never been
RS-25
done
engines
before.
on the core stage and 2
What we'll
solid
be
rocket
transmitting live
boosters now
streaming
propelling the
will
vehicle
be
at
lower
128
resolution,
miles per hour.
more compressed, because we have to fit it into a thinner pipe, if you will.
Hearing good
Every
control
one of
on
these
the
cameras
roll.
is in
Teams
the
in Mission
position
Control
where it is.
Houston,
It's
all good
configured
calls
the way
so
it is
far.
for a
Now
very
30
specific
seconds
reason.
into the flight of Artemis
We're going to
1.
be monitoring anything
First
that we can see
milestone will
with the
be for
cameras
the vehicle to pass
for
through max Q at
spacecraft
about 1 minute
performance.
and 9 seconds
The
into
imagery
launch.
teams at NASA
This is the
are
greatest
composed
period of
dozens
atmospheric
and
force on
dozens
the rocket.
of very highly trained, very specialized people, engineers, technicians, analysts. If we can see it, we're going to try and keep
SLS
an eye
now
on it.
traveling
Imagery has been
607 miles per
invaluable
hour.
throughout the history of NASA. We flew cameras on Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, all of that stuff that we saw when the astronauts were on the
You're
moon.
looking at 8.8
It helps us
million pounds
detect
of maximum
the
thrust
unknown
quiet
unknowns.
here.
It allows us to see things that we didn't anticipate happening before. So when we do fly people on Artemis 2, we can have high confidence that everything is working the way it should.
I love getting a look at those teams that we don't normally see, like the red team that Megan and Tequila just got to interview. A really big thanks to them and everyone that made this liftoff happen tonight. So we are going to toss it back to Megan and Kayla now at KSD. Again, we're about 15 minutes away from perigee raise maneuver. Jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds
Yeah, we
into
wanted
the flight,
to
so
take us
about
back
30 seconds from
into
now.
Orion and talk about some of the science
Again,
that's
quiet
being
here in
enabled by
Mission Control
Artemis 1
Houston as
today.
teams
So
continue
inside of
monitoring the
Orion are
flight of Artemis
10
1.
of these. So they're called CubeSats.
We're now 16
because
miles
they're
downrange
tiny
from the launch pad
satellites.
at Kennedy
Essentially,
Space
they're the
Center,
size of the
traveling over
shoebox, they're folded
2,800
down,
miles per
but
hour.
then once they're deployed, they're opened up. They have solar arrays, things like that. That's when it gets a lot bigger. Now, these are called
Standing by for solid
secondary
rocket booster
payloads
jettison
for
and
this
shortly
mission. Kayla,
thereafter.
can you talk to us about what secondary payloads are?
Yeah, it just really means that it's not a primary objective of the mission. We're not relying on the success of these these CubeSats for overall mission success.
Confirmation
it's kind of a bonus
that the solid
payload,
rocket
right?
boosters
a chance
have
to
separated
deploy
these
these satellites that
177
have
foot
different
boosters.
sensors on them and collect some awesome data to support
Now
other
the core
research
stage continues to
objectives.
power the
And I know
flight of
battery
Orion,
life is a
all four
concern for some of them, but
RS-25
all
engines
10 were
firing,
deployed, and
traveling
scientists,
over
I'm sure, are eager to
3,400
see
miles
what
per
kind
hour,
of
46
information
miles
that hopefully they'll be
downrange.
able to get. And they're just some of several research projects on this flight
2
that will
minutes
help
and
gather
36
data
seconds
about
into
the
the flight.
moon and more.
Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston.
Paving the way for
We've
us
still
to
got 4 good
explore
engines on the
deeper
core
and deeper
stage.
into space.
Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation.
The boldest of the bold missions.
But it's more than just learning how to travel in space.
Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the